Okay, great. Okay, thank you. Good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining us for our January 26, 2021 board meeting. Public notice of this meeting pursuant to the Open Public Meetings Act has been given by the board secretary in the following manner. Posting written notice on the official school bulletin board at the administration building on January 20th, 2021. Transmitted notice to the Courier Post and Philadelphia Inquirer on January 20th, 2021. Transmitted notice to the clerk of Cherry Hill Township on January 20th, 2021. Mrs. Sugars?
Mrs. Arroyo?
She's just coming in.
Here.
Mrs. Stratton?
Here.
Ms. Friedel?
Here.
Mrs. Matlack?
Here.
Mr. Avadia?
Here.
Mrs. Schultz?
Here.
Ms. Stern?
Here.
Mrs. Tom?
Here.
Mrs. Neary?
Here. And then could I have everyone stand for the Pledge of Allegiance? Okay. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, and we'll start with the approval of minutes. We have 5.1 approval of minutes, board work session, special action meeting minutes, and executive session minutes dated December 8th, 2020. And approval of minutes, regular meeting minutes, and executive session minutes dated December 22nd, 2020. Do I have a second? Ms. Friedel? Any questions? Okay, seeing none, Mrs. Sugars.
Okay, I've opened up the online voting so board members can cast their votes.
Sugars, I'm sorry, I'm not in at the moment, so yes.
Uh,
We're not. You want to stay? That's right.
Abstain, thank you.
Abstain. Ms. Arroyo, are you having difficulty?
It just went through.
Oh, it just went through. Okay, very good.
Yeah. Thank you.
Sally's on the phone,
She's in.
but she isn't.
Mrs. Stratton, you voted yes. You were not on the board at that time. I would recommend that you may want to abstain.
I was just about to type you and said, I just looked at that date.
Okay.
Thank you.
You're going to change your vote to abstain. All right, thank you.
Thank
So we
you.
have 7 yes votes and 2 abstentions.
Okay, great, thank you. Okay, we don't have any board recognitions this evening. So Dr. Malash, we do have a presentation, so I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, Mrs. Neary. All right, so I have tonight just a brief update on the strategic planning goals that the board adopted last year. When we talked at the meeting earlier this month, there's a request from the board just to give an overview and an update. So it's a brief update. We are not going to spend all the rest of the evening, as I'm sure that we could, going through it, but just to kind of give us a picture and an idea about where we are. So this is a kind of a large scale overview. So first, we start with the foundation of our work, which is the district mission statement. The district mission statement that we use that guides the determinations and decisions that we make in Cherry Hill, whether it's building a budget, developing goals, making determinations about curricula and experiences, always comes back to this mission statement. And this mission statement was adopted by the Board of Education in May of 2017. The previous one had been adopted in 2000. The development of this mission statement was part of some previous strategic planning work, Cherry Hill 2020 work that went on. And it was done by staff members, certificated and non-certificated staff members, administrators, community members, students, and alumni. And again, the importance of this statement: we shall provide all children with an education that develops open-minded thinkers with the strong academic and interpersonal skills to thrive in an ever-changing world and make it a better place for all. And again, our mission statement. And then just a quote, this is something I refer back to at times and have used with administrators and with others. It's from a professor from a book that he wrote. He's a professor up at Dartmouth College. The future is not a far off point. It arrives in daily doses that must be noticed and understood. This statement, again, continues to have different meaning and have developmental meaning for us in public education as well as for people in the world. But again, just something as we talked and as I talked with folks about the presentation for this evening, something I continue to come back to. So just a little bit about the strategic planning goal development, just as a reminder, a little refresher. Again, some of the work began with the Cherry Hill 2020 process that began back in 2016, 2017 academic year, community meetings, surveys, collection of information. There were two, the mission statement, again, that was adopted in May of 2017, came out in Cherry Hill 2020, as well as the two additional items. One was the community and the folks, the educational community, assertion that our buildings were tired and needed work. And the other was a desire for an implementation of full-day kindergarten. Full-day kindergarten was implemented as a full-time program in the fall in September of 2019. The district had an unsuccessful referendum in December of 2018. One of the things that grew out of this work and out of the failed referendum was the ad hoc committee of the board that was convened in the winter of 2019 and met through the spring of 2019. The ad hoc committee made some recommendations about next steps for the school district. The ad hoc committee was made up of staff members, community members from all different facets of our community who got together over the course of a number of months with a facilitator. This is Judith Wilson, who worked with the ad hoc committee. Ultimately, a presentation of recommendations was made to the board in the spring of 2019. That then launched the strategic planning process in the fall of 2019. We again retained the services of Judith Wilson to guide and to facilitate the strategic planning process. Throughout the fall and into the winter of 2019, that involved her doing small group discussions, large group discussions, meeting with community members, meeting with staff members, meeting with administrators and board members, meeting with students, again, to talk about what people valued, what people saw as important, and what things needed to be looked at, focused on, or worked on within the district. And then that came to a culmination in January of 2020, where there was a committee that got together for a couple of days here in the boardroom and developed these three strategic planning goals. And then ultimately, the Board of Education adopted these three strategic planning goals to be used to guide the district for the next, at that time, 5 years, and at this point, for the next 4 years, from February of 2020 through 2025. So just again, a little bit of background on the process. As we went through that process in the fall of 2019 into the winter of 2019, there were some essential questions that we asked and that were asked by Mrs. Wilson to guide the work that was done. Which goals and strategies will enable the district to fulfill its mission? In what ways can resources be best directed to impact the mission? How can talents be best tapped to maximize capacity for student and adult learning? And then research on effective leadership is clear that focus matters tremendously. Something that was reiterated throughout the process was on this focus. Developing the goals was to provide focus for our district. And again, placing effort and energy into the agreement on which goals, which actions, and which timelines makes focus a possibility and success a reality. Again, an overarching guiding piece in the work of the committees that met and the work of the people that were together. Again, it transitioned into the work of the board. So in early January, the second week of January, this was the committee of folks that got together to go through all of the information that Mrs. Wilson had collected, thousands and thousands of data points looking for large themes. And it was surveys that were completed online, again, by community members, family members, staff, and students. It was from the focus groups. It was from all of the discussions to look at the large organic themes that had developed about what our community and our educational community desired for next steps for Cherry Hill. Made up of teachers, support staff, Board of Education members, parents, administrators, and students, providing voice to all different constituencies. Out of those 2 days, and again, it was an intense couple of days of work, and these were the 3 goals that were developed. The first thing that was developed were the themes and the large key areas, which was to focus on student wellness, on purpose and passion, and on connecting beyond our classrooms. Again, I would say 3 prophetic, thematic ideas that were developed through the work that went on. And then after those themes were developed, then the guiding statements, these goals, these areas that wanted to drive us as a school district as we continue to move forward. And there was intense debate among those committee members, for the people that were in the room, over every comma, over whether to use an and or an ampersand, how things were spelled. And it was students and staff members and the parents all speaking up together and all sharing voice, honestly, in a very equal footing, which was refreshing and enriching for the experience. So these are the 3 goals that were developed and again, adopted by the board in February of 2020. Under student wellness, and again, the guiding statement at the top was building upon our strong foundations of academic excellence, inclusion, voice, and cultural proficiency. The committee felt it was very important to identify that we believe as a school district, those are our foundations. Building upon our strong foundations, academic excellence, inclusion, voice, and cultural proficiency, we will, under student wellness, create frameworks of learning and supports for all students to develop the skills needed for social and emotional wellness. Under purpose and passion, develop highly engaging learner-centered experiences within an environment that promotes voice, choice, and a passion for learning. And connecting beyond our classrooms, provide resources, opportunities, and experiences for our students to connect to the world beyond their classrooms and to become informed and empathetic agents of change in the world. It's a lot. So, spoke with the principals, right? The 19 different schools, the principals are all charged with taking a look at these district-wide goals and then the board goals that were adopted in October to guide and direct much of what goes on within their schools. So I'm talking with the principals. I've put together some samples and some examples of things that are being done across the district, giving an idea about where we are and what's taking place. So under the student wellness one, the creating frameworks of learning and supports. So an example about the West security team, making wellness visits to students' homes to reach out to students who are not participating in school virtually and or to their parents who are not responsive to counselors' inquiries. Again, student wellness, that mental, that social emotional wellness, such a key component, especially every year, but it's been such an intense piece for so many children and families during the course of this year. Looking at the hybrid, again, this comes from West. This page is focused on some of the stuff going on at West. Hybrid Success Center, let me see if I can link through here to a wakelet that was produced. So this is a tool, a wakelet that's being used throughout the district. This is one that the staff and an assistant principal at High School West put together, but it shows hybrid schedule Success Center days 5 and 6. So this demonstrates and shows opportunity for additional support, additional information that can be provided to students on days 5 and 6 in each of these different areas. There are codes for the Success Center to be able to get in. It shows different information, an opportunity for children and for students to be able to access. And then one for a Padlet, again, another electronic tool focusing on social emotional learning. And again, some examples of different opportunities, different information. What is SEL? First week of school. These are materials and resources that were provided to staff to be able to use and support the work that was going on with their students as they were developing what was taking place and how they could provide additional supports. But again, a repository in this Padlet that people could add to. People could, again, help to develop what was being done. Restorative practices work. Again, High School West has been a leader in the district in the implementation of restorative practices. Team members focus on active tools, characteristics of the school, work on rapport, relationships with students, trust being the positive, but again, focusing on the continuation and the development of that work. Also in student wellness, some examples. These are both from Sharp Elementary School. These are more recent. One, focusing on the Great Kindness Challenge, showing kind acts. This is a discussion, and we've had schools across the district participate in the Great Kindness Challenge over the last few years, but this provides a common language for discussion among the staff and students, among families. An example from here, also about the Kindness Challenge and different activities that are going on during the course of the week. Again, a focus on emotional wellness. Some other examples and samples from Barton's, Eagle's Nest nominees, sample of information from Thomas Paine, school newsletters that have been shown, information about zones of regulation, a coping calendar, keeping calm, staying wise, and being kind, example from the fall of Red Ribbon Week. And again, communicative tools, sharing that common language, that common understanding, providing foundational work for students. Folks at Carusi Middle School shared an example of lesson that was developed and populated by a local chiropractor and a wellness lesson that has been used not only by the students, but also by staff. And folks at Carusi informed me that they've also heard from parents who have gone in to watch what the doctor shared and have found benefit. Another one, Dr. Rickensrud at Thomas Paine shared a 7 Healthy Habit Life lesson, a positive meeting, and work that they were doing at Joyce Kilmer Elementary School. Under purpose and passion, again, some examples that Dr. Morton shared for High School West. Under purpose and passion, develop highly engaging learner-centered experiences within an environment that promotes voice, choice, and a passion for learning. Dr. Morton, again, talked about the student voice, the work that has been done over the last 3 years with the aspiration team, or 4 years, and the student voice teams, senior council that he has for student voices, and some of the topics listed here, what he has been together with them. Dr. Morris also expanded that. Again, there's a parental involvement. There's a parental advisory committee that is meeting as well. Character Day and a celebration of character and activities related to character, again, in an area of focus. Again, that came from student work. Project Lit, the Project Lit book group, sharing the 2 of the books that were selected, but again, the students chose. Long Way Down by Jason Reynolds, and This Is My America by Ken Johnson. If you have not read them, the folks that are out there, I encourage you to pick them up. 2 phenomenal reads. And then just even a recent lesson plan that was shared based on Amanda Gorman's reading performance, January 20th inauguration. Then to go through some of the additional background, world language, and what world language teachers do. More than just sharing about language, about culture and history, about social justice movements, oppression, all kinds of different topics that are included. And again, it's centered on not just what happens in Cherry Hill, but our nation and our world. And it's driven by the voices and the involvement of the students. Some other examples that's helped to guide some of our work, and even most recently, the December 22nd Board of Education meeting. We were treated to students from High School East and High School West who presented to the board on experiences and some desires that they have related to their experiences as students. Again, incredibly powerful. related to their work, cultural proficiency, equity, and character ed, as well as the social justice curriculum committee. There's a phenomenal pride grant. I mention it because I think it's important because, again, the collaboration between not just the staff in the district, but pride grants are supported by CHEA, the Teachers Association, that allow us to bring in at-time speakers and do different activities in the district. So one that's been set up at the middle level is having Tiffany Jewell, who's an author, to present on her book. This book is anti-racist. So we're presenting to middle school students. Again, a phenomenal opportunity. We are grateful for that. Dr. Fafani, who's the principal over at Mann, again, because this is going on in elementary schools as well. As he was communicating with his 5th grade students about the student voice, we will meet and work that he is doing at Horace Mann. Again, purpose and passion, some other things, an environment that promotes that voice choice and passion for learning. Dr. Wiggins-Rude, again, shared some examples, presentations that staff has done. Because one of the things that's important, and this is where the goal branches out, not just what's going on in the classroom, not just going on with students, but also it's about professional development. It's about work that we do with staff based on what the needs of the individual schools are and what the needs of the students are. So again, Dr. Rick shared a slide from one of the presentations they did, a discussion that comes up quite often. I always like this graphic, talking about inequality, equality, equity, and justice, and what that means, as you look at the apple orchard. But again, it's involved not just, again, work directly with students, professional development, what's going on with staff. And again, this is from Mrs. Gleason and Thomas Payne. She shared some examples with some guidance for some 5th grade students as they're preparing to move on to 6th grade. And we have found one of the best things that we can do to promote student voice, to engage them in their learning, to find out what their passions are, is to ask them. And when we ask them, we have to listen to them. We have to listen to what they are saying. Now, as the adults and the educators and the parents that are watching, it's not just that we ask them, they tell us that they want to eat ice cream for dinner for the rest of their lives and nothing else and never eat vegetables. Because again, that doesn't work, right? But you ask them, and then we, as the adults, help to guide them. We take their voices, because their voices are there. We take what they say and we help to nurture that and guide them to move forward. So connecting beyond our classrooms, again, in January when these themes were developed, and in February when these goals were adopted, connecting beyond our classrooms certainly, I think, thematically had a meaning for the folks that were together talking about it and planning about it. And it's taken on even a different meaning over the course of the last 10 months, for sure, because of what our experience has been as a result of the pandemic. And again, connecting beyond our classrooms provide resources, opportunities, and experiences for our students to connect to the world beyond their classrooms, become informed and empathetic agents of change in the world. Those words, informed and empathetic agents of change, those were critical words during the discussion a year ago when this went on, about how important it was that people valued and what the information that came from the educational community that valued was placed on what we think children should embody when they finish their experience in our school system. So again, some examples of connecting beyond the classrooms and the typical classroom. High School West has a well-established relationship with the University of the Arts with some of our different programs, where we have students that go over and show work at the University of the Arts from a variety of levels, students with IEPs, students without IEPs, and then there is a relationship that exists. One of the teachers, Megan Langman, who's an English teacher at High School West, and she is one of the PLC coordinators, she shared a little video that, again, time-wise, I didn't put it in, but this website that she found, because we often talk about one of the most important things we can do at the beginning of the year is learn to say students' names correctly, right? A child's name is one of the most personal and precious things that they have. Parents choose names for very specific reasons. We've done professional development with staff in the past where we have that discussion about why do you have the name that you have? Why do you carry that name? And as the adults that work in schools, we need to make sure that we are saying students' names correctly. So again, Ms. Lang provided this opportunity, Vakaru.com, which she had her students go through and do these little recordings of how to pronounce their names so that she could practice. A great opportunity. One of our Air Force Junior ROTC cadets was selected for summer flight program. And then some of the traditional ones that we're looking to enhance and build upon, because again, they have looked different during the last 10 months than ever before. DECA, which is one of the business opportunities outside the classroom at the high school level. Community outreach programs through culture clubs, an example, Mi Casita, art and photography contests and showing, young alumni forums that exist at our high schools, junior police clubs, the internship programs with Virtua and Jefferson. There's been a lot of field trips and programs that have taken place, partnerships with Penn Museum, as well as with the University of the Arts, where students have had the opportunity through the Smithsonian, through some of the other large museums. Back in the spring and in the summer, we worked with the Franklin Institute to provide those opportunities. But again, to expand what the opportunities are for our students to experience, and in turn at times, from the discussions we've had with their families. Working with the Kiwanis and Rotary Clubs, which are large community-based organizations that have school-based activities at the middle school and high school level. The Holiday Heroes program that Rosa implemented. Virtual field trips, Skype a scientist, family STEM nights. We've had teachers at a number of our schools that have participated in a program focused on STEM with Notre Dame over the last 6 or 7 years or so. One of the big activities is a family STEM night, and they've gone virtual, which again has opened up whole new opportunities for families and students in which to engage. So one of the day-to-days, as we look at the Connecting Beyond Our Classroom, the impact of the pandemic, the remote instruction and the hybrid instruction has dramatically changed our thinking and our experience with what we initially, I think, what folks conceived of last January with Connecting Beyond the Classroom. I would say that we were probably had a much more pedestrian view a year ago than we do today. There are many fewer walls in terms of the expectations of where we can connect and how we can connect that exist today, I think, than have ever existed before. And this is a result because we didn't have any other choice for so long because of a result of the pandemic. And connection looks different. Now, I will always tell you that I believe one of the greatest values and most important piece of education is the human connection that exists. You've heard me say it in meetings for years. The human resource that we have in Cherry Hill is the most important resource that we will ever have. The staff members that are in our district who embody these goals on a daily basis, support staff, instructional staff, counselors, administrative staff, that's what makes this district so valuable. And again, the students are that other human resource and the families on the outside and our community at large. The most important resource are the people who are here. The more that we can connect, the more that we can work together, the more that we can pull in the same direction, the better off we're going to be and the healthier we're going to be. Again, we'll go back to the mission statement, what the mission statement says, how these goals connect, and what it is that we endeavor to do and to provide for our students. Again, just some new normal, right? So on the left-hand side, this is work that was being done between our students at Cherry Hill and the University of the Arts, some communication between our students and the UA students. A field trip, right? Welcome everyone. Today we're going to the White House. There's a whole slideshow presentation that existed, a virtual field trip for students. And again, this is a connection. This is over at Horace Mann. This is another one of the pride grants that was done back in the winter, where Horace Mann was lit up as one of the township was identifying spots to visit for holiday lights, for people to be out and about. This was more of a winter theme that was done, snowmen, different colored lights that were there. What that is. It's
There we
looking
go.
differently, thinking differently, acting differently in terms of what goes on. So the questions, next steps, discussions, early in June, do an updated presentation. We'll go more into the specific details of the board goals that were adopted this year and give some more hard and fast examples of what's going on. But there are, and I wish I could show all of the samples. I asked all the principals to share different information. There are phenomenal examples from across the 19 schools. I'm grateful for the work that is going on in those schools. It's been refreshing, and I will tell you incredibly enriching as we have changed this process of how we look at goals and how we look at our focus. So that is. And then if there are, Mrs. Neary, if there are questions or follow-ups.
Okay, I don't see any hands, and I'm actually looking on the the screen because I believe we were able to determine we could see that last time, but I don't see any. Oh, there's Ms. Matlack.
Yeah, Mrs. Matlack and Ms. Stratton both have
Yes.
it.
Dr. Malash, just very quickly, since you said that the principals took the time to send you all the things that they're doing, I would like to see that. And if you could include that in our memo or in an email to the board, I would appreciate seeing what the other schools and what they're doing in other areas too, since they took the time to share that with you.
I will see what I can do what the most efficient way to share that out, some of those samples would be. Absolutely.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, Mr. Oh, there she is.
Thanks, Lori. So
No
I
problem.
was gonna say, or ask rather, kind of the same tone or same vein as Carol there in terms of sharing. Have the principals been sharing this with their staff? Just because I know this might be a good motivator or tool to foster some good collaboration or just to look at some of the highlights and bright spots. So are they sharing that with their staff teams? And then is there any opportunity for them to kind of share the tools that like you're sharing, Carol asked for us to see what the principals are doing. Is there other ways that some of this good positive stuff gets shared out to other buildings so it's not contained to just one school, but maybe we can have other schools trying it? And then my last kind of question or just thought is what things are we kind of cataloging things that we can take into 2021, 22? Because, I'm trying to think past the craziness of COVID now, but in next year, this looks like some good stuff that we can actually use the following year. So are we tagging any of these things as must-haves to keep going?
Yes, so good questions, Ms. Stratton. Are they sharing with staff? Yeah, so, they shared samples of things that have gone on during the course of the year that staff have been engaged or involved in. I don't know that they've necessarily at the building level done a presentation like this at a faculty meeting or something, where they're looking at the building goals, but I can certainly ask them to talk about it. We definitely talk about them. We'll be together, all of us tomorrow afternoon for our district level meeting. So it's one of the things that we will discuss then. We'll talk about this presentation. We'll do some follow-up from things that were shared. We also once a month, we meet in levels, all the elementary principals together for a couple of hours, have all the middle school administrators, all the high school administrators. So there is sharing that goes on back and forth. I will tell you there's probably more sharing that goes on without me or Dr. Mahan or Ms. Weddington being directly involved in one of those meetings, but it's a regular piece. It's, the elementary folks, they have an elementary principals club that they've referred to off and on for decades probably now. So there's a lot of sharing of resource and materials, and we absolutely are always tagging stuff that we can build on to move into next year. That's been beneficial this year and kind of expand, what's taking place. Good question.
Okay.
Mr. Abadi? Yes.
Yeah, so just a couple of thoughts. So thank you, Dr. Malash, for this presentation. This is one of the things we wanted to ask for in the strategic planning meetings that we had, and it's great to circle back. This is one of those areas where it's really not just administration. I think as a board, we need to consider, and what we considered very briefly from a committee member is, how do we keep these aligned? If we take these out, dust them off as a board, and look at them twice a year, it's not gonna be the efficacy as if we think about some of the top level things we need to get done as a board and how they fit to these three themes. A couple other thoughts. Dr. Malash used the word prophetic. Yeah. If we were to sit down and do this now, I think they might have very different meaning, but these would be three very powerful themes. Social emotional learning, social emotional support, just thinking about what's going on in our community across the country and world. Connecting outside the classroom. That's where most of our students are on a daily basis. And passion and really learner-centered experiences. So there's a lot we can do, and I think, there are times I think for report out, for me, I've really become convinced that these buildings could all be 100%. That's not our full job. That's a minority part of our job. So I think that the challenge is back on the board. How do we make the most of this as well? and continue this discussion beyond, twice a year readout. So just a couple things. But yeah, thank you. And I think, I hope this conversation will continue and at the committee level as well, more.
Okay, were there any other questions or comments? Okay,
Nope.
thank you, Dr. Malash.
Thanks, Ms. Neary.
Did you have any administrative reports?
There are no additional administrative reports tonight.
Additional, okay. Then I'll move on to correspondence. I'll start with Mrs. Schultz. I believe you have some correspondence.
I do, thank you, Mrs. Neary. So this morning I had the pleasure of attending the Mental Health Task Force. This is the first time that I have attended this as the board representative, and I just can't say how pleased I was to be afforded the opportunity to be on this meeting with the wonderful staff. So what I learned, I have to be honest, I didn't know much about the Mental Health Task Force before being able to attend, but just to provide some background for the rest of the board members, this was a task force that started with the rise of suicide within the district. And so apparently this has been around for quite some, I don't want to say quite some time, but
Nearly 2 decades.
so for quite some time. And so the gist of the meeting was to brainstorm about what else we could do what more we could do for our students and our parents. So it was great just to be a part of that brainstorming session and just hear everybody's kind of just throwing out different ideas. And where the meeting kind of landed on is that the 3 key areas and the way we were going to get information out to our parents and our students and how we would do more for them was through Zoom, live webinars, and Q&As. And so because it's just so much information, it's so pertinent and important, the group kind of decided that they were going to form some subcommittees just to kind of divide and conquer. And we really ended up at the end of the day kind of deciding that we were going to focus these subcommittees on a couple key areas. So one being meditation and mindfulness. And one subcommittee was going to be really focused on Parent University and some of the things that we talked about in regards to Parent University. Was just kind of taking the idea of what we've already done with Parent University and then just developing some kind of, and again, this is more conceptual, but some of the ideas around it were, how do you raise resilient kids, topics like how do you deal with stress, getting our nurses involved to just kind of talk through like health 101 ideas. And then we would post the links to provide resources for parents and students. And then we would have presentations with guest speakers and then also kind of have some breakout rooms. So really excited to kind of be able to provide an update to the community and the board in regards to where the Parent University goes. And then one key area where we did spend a lot of time talking about, and this is also going to be a breakout group. This will be, I think it was either 2 or 3 different subcommittees that we're going to focus here, was that a great point was made that we still have families with food issues. And so that was just a great topic of conversation and just really focusing in on trying to get greater involvement from the communities and how we could do that, and just really educating on where the community could drop off food, how to drop it off, how to get information out. So again, I think that's just another great committee. That's again, I think it's going to be 2 or 3 subcommittees that's going to be focusing on just families that continue to still struggle with food issues. And then just kind of the one last topic that I am personally particularly really excited about, that we have a target that that the district is targeting to do at the end of February, is to set up either a Zoom or a webinar to specifically get the information out to our parents and our community in regards to the mental health services that we currently already offer. It was a suggestion that was made that the district really does have quite an extensive spread of services in regards to mental health, and that it's a shame that so many of our parents in the community just really don't know what they are, how to access them, and kind of where to go. So the committee had said that we would target the end of February to just kind of start with the information that we already have and just kind of do an educational how-to for parents in the district in regards to those offerings. So overall, it was a really great, for me, it was a really great experience. It's something to be involved in. I'm happy to take questions and we'll try to answer them as best as possible. If not, I will happily take any questions that I can't answer back to Mrs. Weddington and we'll make sure that the board gets the answers. A great committee meeting, or great meeting, great committee.
Thank you, Mrs. Schultz. Did anyone have any questions?
Mr. Abadi.
Yeah.
Nope.
Ms. Schultz, thank you. It sounds exciting and it really dovetails with what we just were talking about as well. Two questions. One, just starting from the end, I think it's critical that people know what we offer. I cannot tell you how many people I talk to in the community, myself included, because I talk to myself all the time now, about getting services for kids and how hard a maze that can be to navigate. I just want to speak to, I think that's very good, and I think we need to direct a lot of attention. It's easy to get people's attention with free food, and certainly that's a need that's out there. Which brings me to my second point. The weekend backpack program. Many moons ago, we spoke about getting some traction in funding. Has there been anything? Is that something we're able to offer? Are we stripped down to Aramark and sort of school lunches for the kids that go to school or that are school eligible?
Last year, Mr. Vadi, we met with a number of different outside organizations that were initially interested in contributing money to the backpack, and that never came to fruition. There were some other organizations that were in contact with us that wanted to work directly with families, with whom we matched the families up. But we have not, the backpack program has not run. It has not run.
Anyway, so I'd like to see us think about on the board, Mrs. Schultz is very likely the right person, but that could be an interesting thing for alternative funding, for bringing in the township. I mean, we had a conversation a long time ago, and I certainly don't want to go back to it, but they're not just our kids. Yes, there are kids, there are families, but there are other people around the table, and we've just gotta collaborate. It's one of those things. It's not an easy topic. We can't print money. We can't print money.
No, we cannot.
So until we can, we really need to get around. There are some. So I appreciate it, Schultz.
Mr. Vadi, I will tell you, yesterday, I was going to mention this, and we'll probably mention it again when I make my comments. But yesterday, during Aramark's services, they were distributing meals. We distributed our 500,000th meal since last March. When we started with the pandemic. So we've served more than 500,000 meals because we continued to serve. We were one of few school districts that continued to serve all summer. We're one of a handful of districts that serves 7 meals, for breakfast and 7 meals for lunch. And that goes out to any child in the community between the ages of 3 and 18, or any child of ours that's enrolled in school, because we have kids that go up to the age of 21 or above. And we've also worked with, the district provides Kilmer Elementary School's parking lot to work with community members who are doing kosher meals in the community every Tuesday evening. In fact, they would have been out there tonight, and have done that since the fall as well. So absolutely, the food insecurity and food need is absolutely there. I still think, even though we're putting out between 1,500 kids sugars in round numbers or so, a week, I still think we're undersubscribed for the children who could benefit from picking up that food. And they will serve all comers. And Mr. Bridges, I can't say enough about Ted Bridges, who's been our manager for Aramark since April, May-ish. Came on, he became the manager, came down. Just revolutionary with what he's been able to do with his staff. With Mario, who's the chef, what they've been able to produce. But we've done more than 500,000 meals have gone out the door effective yesterday.
Yeah, I'm sorry, Mrs. Stern.
So Mrs. Schultz, just 2 quick questions. First, just wondering in terms of who participates in the committee, from like a staffing perspective, PTA, that kind of, parents.
So I'm gonna do my best. I'm gonna definitely get.
Sorry to put you on the spot.
That's okay. So it was led by Mrs. Minion, and there were definitely staff members that all were very gracious to introduce themselves. And I was having some internet troubles and did not write all of their names down, but
Mrs. Schultz, may I assist you?
Yes, I had to phone a friend.
Phone a friend?
Phone a friend, because I don't want to get this wrong, because
Nope.
it was such, I can't say enough about the great work that they are all doing on such an important topic. So thank you, phone
No
a friend.
problem. So Ms. Stern, we have staff who serve as school psychologists, school social workers, school counselors, student assistance counselors. We have, from a supervisory perspective, Mrs. Minjin, who is also a certified school counselor, and Ms. Ragsdale, who's a certified school psychologist. We have community members who are therapists. We have a psychiatrist. We have someone from one of the therapeutic programs. We have a couple parents, and then a board member, Mrs. Schultz.
Thank you. So I just asked because I think about, especially tying into our goals, it's such an important, it's become part of our fabric to address social emotional learning and obviously mental health stuff. And, the latest research on mental health really shows that, we one of the most critical pieces, especially with suicide prevention, because it's a very concerning, which is where the committee came from originally, or the task force, I'm sorry, really shows that follow-up connection is the most critical piece. And it doesn't, so I love the idea of bringing perhaps more like of our educational community in. I don't know if that's been considered in terms of like general ed, teachers, obviously the specialists are critical people. I think generalizing it, because our touch with kids is in schools, right? That's where we see them. That's where so many of these pieces are, it's a teacher who notices a kid is struggling that might reach out. And I think I'm sure a lot of times it is whoever's just tuned into the kid. It may or may not be a mental health specialist. So I love the idea too of kind of just thoughts of how do we, ensure that this kind of resource, this kind of brainstorming is involving our larger community as a whole, as a school district. So that's just a thought as I'm hearing, really important work being done and kind of how we tie it into where we move forward to.
And I don't know whether this is what I can talk more about. I mean, there's annual training that goes on as well, right? That grows out of this. We for a long time have done the QPR, question, persuade, refer piece. There's mental health training, both that's required at the state level, and then what we require internally, both with new staff and with existing staff. The touch point of the representatives who sit on that committee, then to go back and then populate the buildings, and carry through. But I don't think that we can ever spend too much time talking about the social emotional wellness of our kids. There are different committees that exist in schools, whether it's a core team, whether it's the intervention and referral services, all of that is always tied in. Listen, is one of the reasons over, I guess, 4 or 5 years ago, that because it's not too long ago that we didn't have counselors at all of our schools, and we expanded the elementary counselors, which we had in all the schools. That's why we expanded the SAT counselors so that there are in all the secondary schools. We have that continuum of service with the wraparound program through Effective School Solutions, from the elementary level up through the high school. And I say it all the time, we have a psychiatrist that's here 1 day a week, because there are children and families that need that service. It's important, right? As everything is important, but how do you balance that in? How do you make sure, as you're talking about, Ms. Stern, to make sure that it is a fresh discussion, it's a new discussion, and it's not something that's hotly discussed in September and then it slides down and then back again, and you know what I mean? But how do you keep that where that's a constant, consistent piece to go through? It is dynamic, the mental health task force has taken on different iterations, through the last 18 years or so that it's existed. in times of crisis and in times of quiet, and in times of quiet that follow crisis, to go through. Was instrumental in the development of a number of our district policies, the offering of services. One of the things we talk about is the screening tool, that we provide to students every spring, at the high school level. Now, as you know, we are an active consent state. Parents have to sign in for it. Typically, we don't get more than 10 to 12% of our parents allow our high school students to take it. So there's always that piece. It's something we've discussed with PTA. I think there's a PTA component about sharing that information. So yeah, absolutely a good topic.
Thank you. Ms. Stratton, it looks like you were waiting patiently with your hand up.
I'm always happy to wait. Thank you. But I wanted to ask first, thank you, Ms. Schultz, for representing us in that meeting and coming back with some good notes for us to have an understanding of what that committee does. In terms of, I'm sure now that committee is, and if they're not, please let me know. Are they probably also expanding efforts? I know students are probably our first priority, but I'm sure there's some of our staff that we should also be considering in terms of isolation and some of those factors that possibly lead to suicides or even those types of thoughts. Because I'm sure that there might be quite a bit of our staff that might be experiencing that. And I'm sure we have a EAP or some sort of version of EAP to help our staff, but maybe that committee could also find some ways to see if we need to connect with some of our staff teams that might be feeling a bit of that need a little bit of that SEL for themselves to help them through this process as well. So that was my first piece. And then the second thing is, we're not the only district struggling with still with food access, right? So we have this amazing ability to serve all these students now, which is wonderful to hear. And there's still a lot of districts that are still struggling. So if we still have some students we haven't touched yet, we're not unusual in that. And I do know, I was just in a meeting where they said that the county has a couple different organizations that are trying to pinpoint some things for school districts to help them to bridge the gap if they're still having trouble with food access for some of their families and need to go beyond what the distribution allows. So maybe we can tap into some of those things or connect that committee rather with some of those other resources that are kind of like forming in the last, I would say, a couple months or so. And then my final thought is, again, I'm so tired of COVID. I'm looking like COVID is going to be gone at some point, right? And one of my fears is that in terms of food access, we have done an excellent job at providing students that would have not gotten access to those meals, access to it, and families that would not have gotten access to it. I wonder if we should at some point start to look ahead, because my biggest fear is that of all the resources and things that have been provided to folks during this COVID time, if they instantly go away, then how much more struggle are we going to have people actually in a year from now, 6 months from now, whatever that time frame is. I would hate for a kid that went all through 19 to 20 or 20 to 21 being fed, and then 21, 22 being like, sorry, you're back in the frame where you don't meet the cap anymore. So maybe that committee could also start to project a little bit beyond COVID is over too when it comes to food and food access. Just throwing that out there.
Yeah, great, because one of the things that we struggled with this year is our free and reduced lunch applications are down dramatically. And that's very concerning for us. We even went to the level of having principals make phone calls in an attempt to get people to put in their applications. And I think because they are able to get meals right now without any kind of eligibility, anyone can pick up meals. It doesn't matter what their eligibility status is. And I am concerned that this program is supposed to run through June 30th, but we need to get people back into that mode of filling out those applications and making sure that the families that need it are filling that out, making sure that they qualify.
Yeah, I love that you're thinking of that, Mr. Sugars, because we might, as a board, need to discuss what are some strategies that we can help with or support with once that runs out.
Mr.
Yeah,
Sugar?
even if we attach it to like the weekly email or something so that people see it. Ms. Friedel?
I'm sorry, just to piggyback on that conversation, Ms. Sugars. Do we have the applications at the different food pantries in Cherry Hill? I know there's several of them. So if we're partnering with the food pantries, if families are coming in, just perhaps as another, another avenue for getting the paperwork into people's hands.
Yeah, we can certainly talk to them about that. I know we have it at the library and at the township building and places like that, but we can certainly talk to the food bank about that.
Mrs. Sugars, are we like handing out the applications with the meals? Not that we're assuming that the people getting the meals are in that category, but just as a way to reach people that we give it as part of it?
We did at one point, when, see, the application process is supposed to be, I mean, anyone can fill out an application at any time, but the count is taken in October. So it's always our goal to get the applications in before that count, because free and reduced means, eligibility means a lot to the families, but it also means a lot to the district as well. And so we noticed that we had a lot of families that were on the list last year that were not filling out the application for this year. So we did distribute our applications with our meal distributions at that point. It's available online. Again, as I said, we had principals making phone calls, which was different. We also sent out letters that, which we started doing the past couple of years, sending out letters to everybody who was on the list last year. Part of the issue is that when they come back in September, they're automatically eligible. And I don't think a lot of them realize, despite our efforts, that they have to fill out the application before that October point, and then their eligibility ends. So we did a big campaign this year with letter writing to try to get people to fill it out. But I know that our numbers were down. Thankfully, the state allowed us to use our numbers from last year in terms of what it means for the district in terms of eligibility. But I have been concerned, that we definitely need to get people back into that. Once the free meals are no longer available, we need to get people back into that mood and think about strategies for that.
Just a last quick idea. I heard a very interesting piece about a school district out in California that had a lot of families that moved around, changed their phone numbers a lot. So they had a really hard time reaching families. And they leveraged social media they actually placed Facebook ads to try to get reach parents and kids to enroll and be, in terms of the virtual learning for the beginning of this 2020-2021 school year. I'm just thinking even, sharing our district as we're putting up the applications and in all different languages, sharing all the local Facebook page, all the neighborhood Facebook pages and other social media platforms that our families are on. I'm just trying to think, any way we can leverage what's available and either free or very low cost to us.
We did that as well. I mean, certainly on our Facebook pages, we certainly did that. I know Mrs. Wilson, put out a campaign, emails sent home.
Yeah, Mrs. Wilson, we definitely push out Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. And this is where, this becomes that goal or that balance with members of the community. A lot of the neighborhood groups are closed groups, and there are folks from the district or the district itself that are not welcome to be part of those groups. So if there are other people that could link into those groups to reach them, that certainly would always be beneficial, to do it. But yeah, we use, we have found that it's been a tremendous benefit to share that information, to make it available. But yeah, this is where we rely on. I know there's some community men, when Mrs. Wilson posts the stuff about the meals on Monday, there's some community members that repost stuff. There are some of the PTA groups that always pick up on them and share them or repost them. Like that would make such a huge, because she makes it's all public, right? It's all accessible.
Right.
That would make the difference, because then it would get it into the Kingston group or the Arlington group or the Woodcrest group or that kind of stuff. And I agree. I think that would make a difference, to get it out there. We just need the community to help. Ms. Wilson just can't get in.
Okay, great. Did we have any other correspondence?
That's correspondence.
Yeah.
Mrs. Matlack.
I just have 2 quick meetings to report on. Last week was the Cultural Proficiency Monthly Meeting, so I attended as the board representative. And that meeting, of course, was, full of a lot of good work being done by the committee. Mr. Redfern talked to us about the book that this book is anti-racist that Dr. Malash mentioned earlier, and the presentation for our middle schoolers, and invited everybody to attend, and that's part of a Pride grant that they've provided. And we have two new administrative coordinators for cultural proficiency, Mrs. Rebecca Tiernan and Mr. Gene Park, who are now taking over that work to help guide that work for us. So they did a lot of overview as the new administrative leaders of that. And then we broke out into, we went to breakout rooms for the different goals, because everybody on the committee chooses which goals they want to work on. So the goals, everybody broke out into their goal work. And it was really an overview of what has been done, what has been accomplished for your goal, and then reporting back to the committee. And it was decided that each of the committees, since there's so much work to be done, would be meeting, the subcommittees would be meeting separately outside of the monthly cultural proficiency meetings. And so each of the goal committees stated when their subcommittee meeting was going to be. And for the most part, I believe they're going to be in the first week of February, going into that next Monday, I believe. Because there's only 3 weeks between now and the next time the Cultural Proficiency Committee meets. So it's a little tight time frame, but at least the goal committees are going to get started with that more intensive work. And then yesterday, I attended the County Association Leadership State Meeting. And this is for all the county presidents and vice presidents in the state to get together every 2 weeks. And there's always a specific topic that we talk about. And this topic was budget season for districts. And so we had two business administrators from two school districts in the state. Howell School District had their business administrator, Ron Senesac, who was there to talk to us. And Newark School District's BA was there to talk to us, Valerie Wilson. It was very interesting, to hear from both of them, because some of the innovative things that they were telling the county leaders about are things that we have been doing here in Cherry Hill for a few years now. The presentations we do, the budget calendars that we make and that go through our budget, our BNF committee, the user-friendly budget that's on our website, things like that they talked about as innovative things that they were doing in their districts. So, so I just thought I'd pass that along. One of the couple of things that Valerie Wilson from Newark talked about this year's budget season, and and Mrs. Sugars has already alluded to this, throughout the year to us, is that this year is going to be a year like no other. And when we're planning for our budget for next year, we usually base it on the previous year. And this year was so out of the ordinary that, that is going to be difficult to do. And so she said that in her district, and she would advise other districts, that trust between the board and administration going forward is going to be crucial because of all the uncertainties statewide and in individual districts. There's very few things that will transfer from this year into next year's budget. And boards must figure out how to predict the unpredictable and budget for it. I thought that was like the quote of the pandemic, that, you can apply that. We must predict the unpredictable and then figure out how to move forward for that. She said some of their expenses that they believe will continue But with no continuation of, or guaranteed of continuation of state or federal funding, will be the student meal plan, the student meals that like we give out, that they also give out, and PPE will be expenses that they believe, and from our previous discussion, we also believe will be expenses that we will need to seriously consider about continuing, regardless of what state or federal funding we continue or don't continue to get, because there, especially with the food for our students, there's still going to be a great need for that. And she mentioned something that that many of the people on that call, and there were 54 people on that call, had not thought about. I'm sure our administrators already have, because they're in the trenches with the budget right now and hasn't been brought to our level yet. But the transition back into in-person full-time for everybody in the building will be an additional expense, because there most likely will be social distancing and other precautions in place. And so, you know, in order to do that with absolutely everybody back in the building, will take a lot of planning and probably additional expense. So that was something that invoked a lot of discussion afterwards. Many on the call had not thought of that, but it was clear that the administrators on the call had thought of that. So I know that ours have as well. Couple interesting little tidbits that I just wrote down was that Newark said that they have no capital budget in their budget. They used $45 million from their excess fund balance this year. And they have the oldest buildings in the state. And she said that she's very concerned about, because they have no capital budget to speak of, you know, they're very concerned about their buildings going forward. So I just pointed that out just because, you know, that everybody, north, south, central, Jersey, we're all looking at the same concerns, the same considerations, and the same ability or inability to fund the things that we need going forward. So it was an interesting conversation, and we were grateful to hear from those two. That's all I have, Mrs. Neary. Thank you.
Thank you. Were there any questions? Okay, did we have any other correspondence?
Mrs. Neary?
Ms. Stern?
I have a very brief report that I was lucky enough to be a participant observer in the second round interview for the assistant superintendent for 6th through 12 last Friday. That's all I can say. But I very much appreciated the opportunity. So, and I guess there will be further steps after that second round interview. That's probably as much as I can say, right, Dr. Moss?
That's correct. That's
Okay. I do okay?
You did well. That's right.
All right, thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Stern. Okay, was that it for our correspondence then? Okay.
Mary, I just wanted to add, or ask a question rather, for Mrs. Matlack, for the Cultural Proficiency Committee, if we come across anything that might be like helpful or useful, do we share that to you to maybe to share with the group, or do we give that to Ms. Wethington, or who do we direct that to? Only had a question about it because in terms of the cultural proficiency, there was something that came out like maybe a week or two ago that was a very detailed report by the New Jersey Task Force on Anti-Bias. And so they had some good recommendations for how to move into an anti-bias realm and circle. And it was really well done, the way they help you to identify first your problems, of course, and then give you some helpful steps to go towards it. And it had it's chock full of resources and all. And I think they have a full report that you can look at, but like, will we just share that with you to share, or would that go to Ms. Wethington?
I think if any board members, have something like that to share, and they think that it'd be beneficial to the committee, that it'd be best to share it with Mrs. Wethington, and then she can, decide how best to incorporate that information. So for the new board members, you would send it to Mrs. Wethington, copy Dr. Malash, and copy Mrs. Neary as board president on that communication.
Perfect. Thank you.
Okay, great. Thank you. Dr. Malash, do we have student representative reports?
We do, Mrs. Neary. Nathan from High School West and Naomi from High School East are both in the meeting. We just moved them in as panelists. Nathan and Naomi, can you guys hear us?
Hello.
Yep.
Good evening. I cannot currently hear the Zoom meeting, so I will be dialing in from my phone just so I have an audio. Pardon me for 1 second. If Naomi, you are ready, would you mind?
Yeah. So before I started my presentation, I just want to real quick say listening to the presentation on mental health was really great. And I just want to encourage the board to have students involved in this process. Obviously, no one understands the tribulations of being a student in the Cherry Hill District like a student in the Cherry Hill District. And I would recommend bringing on some members of the Cherry Hill East Bring Change to Mind Club to the Mental Health Task Force. They're a club that's been continuously working to help improve mental health conditions for students in East. And I think it's really great that it's run by mostly underclassmen. So it's really a younger perspective on just issues plaguing many students in the district. All right, so just starting with my update. Obviously, a theme this year has been adapting, and activities have been continuing to do that this month as they have been all year. For example, basketball has been practicing with masks in different groups with their team placements. Eastside is getting to produce another issue completely virtually, along with upping online coverage significantly. DECA is prepping for a completely virtual state competition. Yearbook is also being worked on and produced almost completely virtually. It's definitely been great getting to consistently report on great work month after month, despite the obvious circumstances. All of the clubs are still progressing very well. But one activity that is experiencing some difficulties that I wanted to talk about is robotics. As many of you may know by now, there's a petition that's garnered over 1,000 signatures requesting funding for the team advisors and materials for the robotics club. So this petition is requesting that advisor stipends be written into the teacher's upcoming contract renewal, and that there is funding budgeted for robotics teams in all upcoming in all Cherry Hill schools. And some of the reasons is there's no other STEM competitive extracurricular in our district. Many of our extracurriculars tend to be like DECA, mock trial, more based around the business world. This is one of the only STEM opportunities, and obviously STEM is a really big part of the work environment. Personally, I think what makes Cherry Hill Schools so special is that it's not just a place where you're obligated to go at 8 a.m. and then you immediately walk out at 2:30. There's plenty of people who spend a lot of their free time here developing their interests and have a lot of their most valuable experiences outside of the classroom. So that being said, I think it's really important to support the extracurriculars that shape our high school experiences, and even more importantly, support the advisors who make these things happen with sufficient funding. We can't just celebrate the success of teams like the robotics that did extremely well in competition this past year and for many years without investing into these programs. So I encourage the Board of Education to take this petition extremely seriously and work soon to make this club, not put it in danger for competition. This shouldn't be a discussion. This is such an important club that has produced many successful alumni. So I highly encourage the board to focus on that. Furthermore, so going to our return to school, I think as we return to school, it's important to explore ways to bring back lunch, at least for the time being. There are so limited amount of students actually choosing the hybrid model that there is definitely a route to having lunch. Many teachers don't even have one student in their class, and with the ample space, we should be able to set up something that is socially distanced. Going back to the conversation on mental health, the hour break was incredibly useful for a lot of reasons. Besides the fact that it's just a time where you would eat, it is very exhausting going from class to class on the computer, constantly upping your screen time. And that 1 hour break was a time for students to decompress instead of just going straight from 9:30 to 2:15, or varies depending on the school, but at least at the high school level. So I think that there's definitely, I encourage the school to create a plan to restore lunch. As we've seen, not many people have signed up for the hybrid model. Many teachers are reporting none, 1, 2, or 3 students. So that is something that I think the board should really focus on. Just a brief student government update. It was provided to me by the school president, Daniel Pipersberg. SGA is currently teaming up with UNICEF to do the annual canned food drive from now until February 3rd. So you can either donate money to various students' Venmos or drop off actual goods before the school starts. So that's just another way to help the community, help people who are struggling with food shortage in this time. And it's just another example of how Cherry Hill East is continuing to contribute to its community and continue to work despite being completely virtual. And I also just wanted to congratulate Daniel Pipersberg for representing our school at the New Jersey MLK Day as a panelist. And that's all for today. Thank you so much.
Okay, Nathan, are you able to unmute?
Yes, hello, can everyone hear me?
Yes.
Wonderful. Good evening, Dr. Mosh, the board, and everyone at home. We would like to commence the Cherry Hill West Community Report with information about our hybrid opening. Students are back in action this hybrid opening. The first week of hybrid schedule started last week, and West students who chose to come back to the building reported feeling happy to see their teachers and some peers for the first time in quite a long time. While the actual number of students that came back to the school was quite low, they brought back with them enthusiasm and good cheer. To be exact, West has seen about 95 students in the building per day, and we look forward to a continued hybrid learning experience. As for athletic news, our winter sports have officially returned, with both basketball and bowling, having games and matches this week. Additionally, boys and girls swimming have been holding virtual workouts until they get back into the pool, which will happen approximately February 1st. And wrestling season is going to begin in March, with practices being held outdoors for about an hour after school. As for news regarding our performing arts, choral music, the choral music department is eagerly looking forward to the coming weeks. Production pieces are in works for all 3 a cappella groups at West. Chamber Singers, our co-ed group, Fermata, our all-women's group, and Men of Note, our all-men's group. Co-curricular choirs, such as West Singers, Concert Choir, and Chansons, are currently learning new music, and we look forward to a possible production, especially West Singers' take on 2 arrangements of the common gospel text, Precious Lord. Mr. Cooper's students are looking forward to working with a student teacher from the University of Delaware, Ms. Stalbert. This February, we cannot wait to extend her a warm West welcome. As for theater, while we did not get to premiere We Will Rock You at the beginning of January as we anticipated, West Theater Workshop is still working diligently to bring the joy of theater home. Students are continuing to rehearse and record their parts so we can premiere the show and celebrate their hard work. We Will Rock You is scheduled to be live streamed February 26th, 7th, and 28th. Tickets to see the show can be purchased online at a link that I will be posting in the chat. As for other news, as for NHS inductions, on Wednesday, January 13th, the National Honor Society inducted their newest members. A virtual ceremony was in place for all students to celebrate in their devotion to the pillars of the National Honor Society's knowledge, scholarship, service, leadership, and character. A musical performance was in order by West Singers, who opened the ceremony, followed by the candle lighting ceremony led by NHS officers, President Giselle Dickinson, Vice President Nathan Kong, Treasurer Rosemary Villatoro, and Secretary Quinn Procopio. The ceremony was closed with Dr. Morton's remarks. As for the food drive, for December's service month, Cherry Hill West collected 1,100 pounds of food to donate to the Cherry Hill Food Pantry. The 2 organizations that collected the most food were the Air Force ROTC and the National Honor Society. As for 8th grade virtual visitation night, High School West will be having a virtual visitation night for current 8th graders on January 27th. This will be held to show students what is offered at Cherry Hill West as they prepare to graduate from middle school. We will also be hosting virtual shadow days. Students will be able to virtually shadow what a day at West is like. By doing so, they will be able to see what classes are like, speak to coaches and teachers, understand the different periods, the block schedule. These will be occurring on February 8th and 22nd, and West looks forward to having students see what the day is like. That will be all for tonight from West.
Thank you. Thank you both. Okay, that now brings us to our first public comment. There'll be 2 opportunities for public comment this evening. The first public comment session is for agenda items only. There will be another public comment section for any topic at the end of the meeting, and it will be 3 minutes, and you'll hear a sound when the time is up. And please remember to state your full name and address. And it went to presentation, so I can't see the participants.
Right now, there's nobody with their hand up, Mrs. Oh, hold on. Yep, there's nobody with their hand up, Mrs. Neary.
Okay, were there any submitted comments?
I have some, Mrs. Neary, but they're all for the second public comment period.
Okay, great, thank you. Okay, so then we'll move to superintendent comments. Dr. Malash, did you have any comments?
I do, Mrs. Neary, thank you. So first I want to start, we have a banner hang up here that's been up here all month. It says School Board Recognition Month. We thank our school board members. January is School Board Recognition Month, always as designated by the state. I always wonder why they choose January, especially because now it's the turnover in the organization, for the board as opposed to when it used to occur later in the spring. But on behalf of the 11,000 students, the 1,700 or so employees, just want to thank the 9 board members. Submitting your name, running for the board, being elected, and then serving on the board is not a responsibility for the faint of heart. There are challenges, there are long meetings, there are long days, there's a lot of information, and there are high expectations that folks have. So I do want to thank on behalf of everybody in the district, our board members for what you do and the sacrifices that you make from your own families to be able to spend time with us. So folks in the community, when you see a board member, thank them for what they do. Even if you don't always agree with them, that's okay. Right? We talked about civil discourse in the past. Thank them for what they do. So congratulations on that. I also want to mention that today, and she is with us taking notes and helping to run the meeting, today's Lynn Sugar's birthday. So I just want to keep that in mind. So happy birthday to Mrs. Sugars, our business administrator, board secretary. I had a special note, Mrs. Sugars, right here. It says it on my, let's say that. Nathan mentioned, or Naomi mentioned Daniel Pipersburg and the work that he did last Monday on Martin Luther King Day. He got to serve as one of the student hosts as part of the statewide virtual conference. We had students from high school East and West. I believe we had one middle school student who participated as well. It was a phenomenal day. Mr. Guy, George Guy, who's the principal at Rosa Middle School, is also the state chairman for the Martin Luther King Committee. So congratulations, Mr. Guy, on the virtual conference. And thank you to our students. I know we had a lot of staff members who participated. Ultimately, I think there will be links I'll be able to share out with the board. As you can see, our students and the work that they did during the course of that day. Also in the follow-up to Martin Luther King Day, to that day of service, thank you to all the members of our community who participated in a service activity. I know that some were involved and engaged in activities that were based in our schools or in our school districts. Others were involved at their synagogue or their church or their place of worship or just other places within the community. But thank you for doing that. Thank you for being a role model for our children and for putting yourself out there on that day of service. Hopefully everybody had the opportunity to reflect a little bit on the words that Dr. King has shared. High School East did something interesting this year where they posted, they asked people to read Dr. King's letter from Birmingham jail, which was a great revisit for, I think, for many adults, or some at least that I spoke to, who had read that either in high school or college, but revisited the text and certainly generated some great conversation. So again, talk about connecting beyond the classrooms, different ways to do things, always appreciative when people are thinking outside of the box. Last Tuesday, we did welcome students back into the district with the relaunch of our hybrid model. It is great to have students in schools. It's, again, our desire, the desire of the school district, since Monday, March the 16th, has been to be able to return all of our students and all of our staff members back into our buildings as soon as we possibly can into what was a traditional school day. We are certainly not there yet, and there are many hurdles that must be overcome in terms of spacing and what we're allowed to do within our schools, but it's great to have students and staff members back in the schools together. Special reminder for everybody, please make sure that you are continuing to do the daily COVID screening at home before you leave. We remind staff all the time, reminding families, please, 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 make sure you are doing the screening. If there is a question, if there is an uncertainty, if the child is not feeling well, staying home is the best possible option if your child is not feeling well. And certainly reach out to the school nurse. We want to make sure you're focused in terms of what goes on. Please make sure parents are maintaining communication with your students' teachers. The teachers have been doing an incredibly challenging job as they are coming back into the hybrid and balancing students in the classroom and students at home, the transition of kids back and forth from one day to the next, and some children who are home on each of the days. Thank you for the grace that you are providing and for the input. Again, I know that our teachers appreciate the support that exists. As we come, which we are going to do very quickly at the end of this week, to the end of January, we will be 1/2 of the way through the academic year. Next Monday, February the 1st, begins literally the second half of the year. It's fascinating how fast the school year goes every year. And even in this year of different circumstances and different experiences, the year continues to progress. I think, Mrs. Neary, that is all of my notes for tonight.
Okay, great, thank you. Okay, so that brings us to our action agenda, brings us to curriculum and instruction, and I will turn it over to Ms. Matlack as committee chair to move the agenda.
Mrs. Neary. The superintendent recommends, and I move the following. 1, approval of attendance at conferences and workshops for the 2020-21 school year. 2, submission of the Addressing Student Learning Loss Grant from the New Jersey Department of Education. 3, resolution for the award of settlement agreement. Do I have a second? Mrs. Aurora. And any comments or questions? Mrs. Neary.
I was just wondering, Dr. Malasha, perhaps you could just explain what's in the Addressing the Student Learning Loss Grant?
Yes, actually, Dr. Mahan's on, and she'd like to say a couple of words about it. Thank you for asking, Mrs. Neary.
Great, thank you.
Mrs. Neary, great question. The Learning Loss Grant is provided by the New Jersey Department of Education for school districts to provide support or intervention for students who may have experienced learning loss during the last few months and then the last academic year. So they gave you several options in the grant to develop a program for the summer and or a program that extended during the academic year. You just had to target a specific population of students.
Okay, great, thank you. Were there any other questions? Ms. Friedel?
So Dr. Mahan, this would be in addition or above what the district already was planning related to ESY and campaign?
Correct. This will be in addition to those established programs.
If awarded, it would actually increase the number of students eligible for, or would they be the same subgroup of students?
It would increase the number of students eligible for participation. We actually targeted the middle school population because we do not have a program at that level. And based on the data that we shared with you at the C&I committee meeting, we felt that that was an appropriate population of students to target for additional supports. We included information on bridge programs, so for students who would be entering middle school as well as students who are exiting going to high school, and then targeted supports in English language arts and math. The grant also called for supports in social emotional learning, which is a piece that was highlighted again tonight. So hopefully we will be awarded that grant.
Fingers crossed.
Yes.
Do you have an estimated award time? Like, did the department give an idea of when they would notify?
They did not. The grant was due last week. I don't have the grant
Okay.
right in front of me, but I did not see it. I'm sure there was a timeline. I just don't recall.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you. Were there any other questions? Okay.
Okay, seeing none, then Mrs. Sugars, we're ready for the vote.
So I'm opening up the online voting, so board members, you may cast your votes. And we have a unanimous vote.
Okay, great. Now we'll move to the business and facilities agenda, and I will turn that over to Mrs. Schultz.
The superintendent recommends, and I move the following. Number 1, financial reports. Number 2, resolutions. Number 3, National School Lunch Program Equipment Assistance Grant. Number 4, resolution for the award of transportation. And number 5, resolution to accept audit report. Do I have a second? Mr. Avadio, are there any questions? I am seeing none. Mrs. Sugars?
All right, I'm opening up the online voting. So board members, you may cast your votes. And we have a unanimous vote.
Okay, great. That brings us to the human resources portion of the agenda. Mrs. Schultz?
The superintendent recommends, and I move the following. Number 1, termination of employment certificated, Number 2, termination of employment non-certificated. Number 3, appointments certificated. Number 4, appointments non-certificated. Number 5, leaves of absence certificated. Number 6, leave of absence non-certificated. Number 7, assignment salary change certificated. Number 8, assignment salary change non-certificated. And number 9, other compensation certificated. Do I have a second? Ms. Stern, are there any questions? Again, seeing none. Mrs. Sugars.
Okay, opening up the voting once again.
The Corinne's got her hand up.
Oh, apologies.
Oh, there
Sorry
she
about
is.
that, Mrs. Stratton.
Sorry about that. I just want to make sure I do it right this time. If I need to only abstain from 2 things, do I just hit abstain and tell you which ones, or hit yes and then tell you which ones I need to abstain
You're gonna
on?
hit yes, and then you're gonna tell me which 2 items you need to abstain from.
Okay. Should I tell you now, Ms. Sugars?
Nay, please do.
Okay, 16.5 and 16.9.
Duly noted.
Thank you.
Okay, we have a unanimous vote other than the exceptions noted by Mrs. Stratton.
Okay, great. That now brings us to policy and legislation. Now I will turn it over to Ms. Friedel.
Good evening. The superintendent recommends, and I move the following. 17.1, first reading of policies, and 17.2, second reading of policies. Do I have a second?
You can't see, but all 3 of us in the boardroom are giving you a second.
Mrs. Schultz, thank you. Any questions? Seeing none, unless there's somebody in the boardroom. Mrs. Schultz, Mrs. Sugars.
I have opened up the online voting. Board members, you may cast your votes. And we have a unanimous vote.
Okay, great. Brings us to strategic planning. We don't have any items to move, but I'll turn it to Mr. Avadia.
Yes, thank you, Mrs. Neer. It seems like only a week ago, we were in a town hall with, I think at the peak, about 125 of our fellow citizens talking about sort of a new topic for the public to consider. But I thought it was, I thought it was very well rolled out. I thought there was a lot of interesting discussion. I think there was some interesting points of view, and then I know we had the thought exchange out as well. So that's one thing. I don't know if, so we had 4 esteemed board members who were panelists, and then I know we had a few kind of on the other side as participants. So if there are any, thoughts, I think this really for us as we kind of move forward from like a really close focus on we return to learn, this is going to be the model for a different type of discussion with the community. So that's one thing to consider. And then other than that, strategic planning as a committee, we'll meet again next week. There are things that we are continuing to discuss and tee up and get points of view from a committee level to bring to the full board. Those will continue over time. Our new topic has to do really with strategic looks at budget and not budgeting, but essentially like how can we think of that? As many of our board members know, a huge ton of our outlay of capital is really contractual. And so, we need to think about what are the degrees of freedom and such things. And so, I kind of like push it out to board members. We haven't met since I reported on our last meeting, so there's nothing the committee's bringing forward. But if there are any points of view of town hall or what the committee should be doing, not doing, or things we should address, I sort of open the floor for anyone who would like to contribute that kind of information. Unless Dr. Melange or Ms. Sugars has something they want to bring up.
I'm fine with that. Mr.
I'm just wondering, I'm sorry.
No, go ahead, Mr.
Thank you. I'm just wondering if you could share kind of next steps after the town hall, because I think that was, I got a chance to listen in on it. I thought it was a wonderful collaborative discussion. And I think, specifically regarding, configuration of schools, I think there's, it was nice to hear the community so engaged, and I also think the community also wants to know what's the next step from our perspective, so this one.
Sure. So one of the things I brought up at the town hall is that this is unfamiliar territory in the sense that we don't have a full project plan, we don't have a proposal out to the public based on this town hall. But we approved as sort of at least a bit of the board, the way the thought exchange would go out. That data gets synthesized back to us and presented. We'll look at it maybe in strategic planning. We could look at it as a full board. For me, I think this is one of many, many, many topics. But if we were to have some feeling that we could go forward, I think it would have to turn into something that became a proposal that we put out there. But that would be, that would take some time. So I don't know, Dr. Moss, so next steps, like what would, we have the thought exchange out, that's closed at this point.
So thought exchange closed yesterday, I believe. The board, we're doing the analytics now. With that information out to the board, we'll have discussion, strategic planning. Next week when we're all together on Tuesday, see what do we get, right? So that the portion of the community that was involved in the thought exchange, plus looking over the notes that we took during the course of the virtual town hall about, this is what where people are leaving. So in that thought exchange, remember there were a couple of questions. One was about the configuration of the elementary schools. One was about the configuration of the middle schools. That's an informational piece for us to examine, and it starts to build. So as we planned out town halls throughout the rest of the spring, so we look at the configuration of schools, we look at what needs to be done in schools, and there's going to come a time when the board's going to need to say, all right, well, I think this is, administration, we want you to work on developing a plan that has 3 neighborhood schools or maintaining the 3 middle schools as they are. What does that look like? Or we want you to work on a plan that's going to have relatively consistent enrollment at the elementary schools. What does that look? And then as we decide what other, because we know that there is physical work that has to be done in our schools, right? That work that we talked about, a lot of it from and 18. Much of it still needs to be done, right? So then we talk about, all right, so we're going to configure, or if we're going to reorganize the districting of students, or we're going to reorganize what middle schools look like, what do we need to do, right? And then start to lay out a plan of, well, we know that there's work, physical work, construction work, bricks and mortar that has to be done. So what does that look like? How can we plan that? Is there curricular work that needs to be done? Is there organizational work that needs to be done? How do we communicate that? As we start to narrow it down, because right now it's just a really big funnel. It's like waves crashing on the beach, and we're going to start to narrow that down into a much clearer, much more direct piece. And that's where the board, it's so critical, it is expressive and guiding and saying, all right, well, this is, I think, is the next step. That's that role of the board member to say, this is what we want to do. Right? It's one of the things that I'm always fascinated with, as we talk about school board recognition month, one of the board reps, the school board reps that's come out, always talks about the role of the board member is to say, let there be light, and light there shall be, not how many light bulbs and not with candle power, but just let there be light, and that's the direction I think the next steps that will come from the board.
Let me, yeah, thank you. That was much better said than I could have done. Let me also say, though, that we have a project plan around the work in the schools and looking at the deficit. So that's what we talked about at the last 1 or 2 board meetings ago. Like, we're going to get something from our architect of record that looks at deficits across the district. They are significant. So this stuff happens in parallel. I guess, one thing that I've heard, is there anyone else who?
I don't see anybody.
So one of the things that I've heard and even came up in discussion is, if we're making a change, there needs to be time for transition. This needs to be clear what's going to happen. The other thing that I've heard, which is sort of difficult for me to understand, but it's kind of like, well, why are you looking at this? Why don't you look at 3 other things? And I think, as you look at a humongous set of issues that need direction and need this board to support a direction, we're going to need to look at 100 issues. The only way to do that is to start looking at issues, So it's one of those things that, like, just because it wasn't the first, for instance, high schools came up at this discussion, even though explicitly we said, we're not going to look at that. We're really not ready, because the board hasn't really sort of formulated a point of view in terms of what we're even asking. And I get it. I mean, it's fair to bring up anything from a public perspective, but from a board perspective, we just need to examine every issue. And the reality is we don't have the kind of time where we can look at one issue and advance the rest. It needs to be a full project plan. So there's complications.
Mrs. Neary, I just wanted to, if I respond back to, so, I think, I think the piece that you're saying was notable to me in the town hall was the piece about community members really saying we needed transition time. And I think that always makes sense with kids and families, right? To kind of have people have time to absorb and prepare and do things in an order that makes sense. And also the need for the big picture approach, which I think is so critical. And it was actually one of the things, Mrs. Matlack, I remember the meeting after, the bond decision, talking about that was some of the feedback is really kind of taking a look from a big picture standpoint. And yeah, I mean, I think that this has been very important to keep this agenda moving forward. I think strategic planning at times has stalled. So we really need to kind of keep that forward progress. I know I see that as a community member when I was on the other side and sitting on the board, I really want to support that. And I also think that we need to continue to engage the community. A town hall is a great opportunity to engage. It can't end there in terms of the community's input, which I think thought exchange is the next step. I think we just, we have to continue that engagement piece so that every stakeholder has an opportunity to hear the information and feedback, give feedback to it. So I'd love to, see how that evolves, but not to the point that we don't get to some, keep our forward progress and get to some decisions eventually, which I do think fits into our responsibility kind of to set that in motion. So.
I mean, I appreciate that. I think by the end, by June of this year, we need to look at what's the full facility piece? What are we recommending to look at and really go forward with configuration? and other things. I mean, the thing of it is, there is a strategic planning committee. Every board committee is strategic, right? I mean, it's, so it's not ours to run the schools, right? I don't teach, thank God for elementary school students. I don't teach elementary school math or science or anything. And so, so there is that. And we have talked in the past about a communications committee. That's not what strategic planning is. Strategic planning tries to do good, but, through process versus, so we don't have our own method. So there's a lot to think about. But, I think it's, we definitely need to come to consensus. I mean, I think Dr. Marsh's making a good point. At the end of it, the board needs to say, this is what we're moving forward with. We can do listening tours. We can, it's not too late for anything because, we're early in the process. But at some point, people will have to self-select into the process as well and talk about the topics that we're talking about as well, which was great about this town hall is that everyone engaged in the topics that we present. And so that is important. It's just that, you think about it, in any given year, you have, maybe 10 to 12 strategic planning meetings or something like that. Maybe it's 12. That's not a lot of time to talk about vision of a school district. And then you bring it to the board. So it's pretty Herculean, but we'll get it done. We have to.
Mr. Avadia, what is our timeline as far as when, I don't think this was something we were going to discuss as a full board tonight, and then decision on a path forward regarding the reconfiguration of schools, right? Like what was our timeline on that?
So Mrs. Sugars and I developed a topic calendar for strategic planning through June. That's kind of the end of my line of sight. But what we didn't do is figure out the timeline of the topics. So there's a fluid nature to it. I don't know. I mean, actually, Mrs. Neer, it's really more your thing. For me, it's really about getting under the issues and then figuring out what the timeline is forward. But looking at, so what we've said, the only thing we've said really time-wise is by the time we can have a full picture, full bond, it would take us at least till September of 22 with the major piece of work starting in summer of 23. Now that seems far out. So it seems to me that we need to really be able to do that timeline. And for that, we need to make some decisions, I think, by the end of this, certainly calendar year. But if the thought exchange goes in place and the board has discussion, I think we could look at configuration or something that was ready to push out this academic, at the end of this academic year. I don't know, maybe that's optimistic. It'll depend how it evolves. It's really not defined.
Mr. I have a question kind of piggybacking on what Ms. Neary is saying. Maybe I'm the only one who's looking at it this way, but I would be interested if there could be discussion in strategic planning about some tentative timelines. And even if it's tentative or even if it's even if it's multiple options and we all as a board understand that it is, it's just, hey, this is if we're going to go out with one bond, this is if we're going to go out with two bonds, because my fear is that if we don't have some kind of a timeline of this would be a tentative submission date and we don't back forward, we don't work backwards from that, we could discuss this to death. And then we could lose sight of the importance of hey, it's, I know we've kind of got the April where Vesica is going to come in and kind of present, but I could see we could lose a lot of valuable time discussing things. And to Ms. Stern's point, we could endlessly engage the community in a lot of topics. And there is a point in time where we got to draw a line in the sand and make the decision. So again, I could be looking at it wrong, but I'm not saying I would hold strategic planning's feet to the fire on these deadlines. But for me, I just think that's really, really helpful to say, if we were looking at one big bond and we were tentatively trying to go out, these are probably the wrong dates, but November of FY22, and we kind of worked backwards. If we were thinking about two smaller bonds, that would be helpful for me, because I am hearing and we're doing a lot of great work, but I can see us discussing. So that would just be something that would be worth perhaps maybe having that conversation at the next meeting. And again, I could be the only one who feels this way, but.
No, I think it's well articulated. I think, look, couple things. So Ms. Sugars really, and worked with me to take ad hoc committees' recommendations and materialize them into a plan. We need I think what we're hearing is we need the next version of this. Is Dr. Mullins, is it you that talks about admiring a problem?
So for Dr. Rushi.
Okay, well,
But yes,
so Dr. Rushi is so right. I mean, you could literally spend 5 years of a listening tour and talk about how bad the buildings are. You know, it's funny, look, I think even the community is all telling us, look, we know the buildings are, you know, so yeah, this has to be a board of action. Okay, so we'll work on something. I will say between the follow-ups, like the meetings are very, very busy. But we'll include as a topic for this next one, and then maybe have some good definition of it for March. But yeah, we'll do it. I think it's important. I'm always a little worried in strategic planning of running ahead of the board, but you know, Ms. Neary, who's on the committee, can kind of keep us hopefully focused in terms of like whatever. But so yeah, we'll bring that forward for sure. Thank you.
I think Ms. Matlack also had a comment or a question.
Thank you. At our last strategic planning meeting, we had asked Bob Garrison to give us the big picture so that we could bring that to the board and have these discussions on how to narrow it down, what kind of timeline we could look at. So to Mrs. Schultz's point, we did start considering that we don't want to be admiring the problem for months on end. But at this point, we don't have those specific dates, but I think we could, from our discussion in January, expect that we can start narrowing that down and talking more specifics, especially since we, talked with Bob Garrison about getting us more of the information so that we had the big picture going forward. Because without the big picture, it's very difficult to say what's important to do on a smaller scale. We need that, and we all agreed we need that overarching big picture in order to do that. So I just wanted to point that out, that and remind everybody that we did start talking about that, and to Mrs. Schultz's point, we're going to start trying to nail that down soon, so that we are not spending months admiring our problems.
So for the configuration piece specifically, at what point, should we be sending that to BNF to look at the cost impacts for those changes? Because that would impact a recommendation and a decision as well. And I'm not sure if that's a Mrs. Sugars or Dr. Malash question.
We can discuss some. Honestly, Ms. Neary, on Tuesday evening during committees, there are certain pieces with configuration. There's going to be a cost associated with whatever we do moving forward. I think that there's got to be a tangible philosophical piece from the board at that same time about this is what we believe is important. And then the cost will fall in line with where that is. Middle schools, and again, we talked about this some with middle schools. When you talk about middle school configuration, all students who attend Rosa are assigned to a bus. Even with the work that's going on Crescent Road, it's still going to be a hazardous route. No matter where we go, all kids that attend Rosa are going to be riding the bus. When we look at some of the elementary configurations with how schools are set up for those children that are attending schools that are not set in their geographic neighborhood, which is many of our children, they're hopping on a bus in the morning. If they go to one school or another, they're still on a bus. Is there a financial piece? There may be some impact that's there. So I would say, at least in terms of configuration, knowing, I think we've made the determination based on Dr. Griff's report. We know we need the schools that we have. We know we need 12 elementaries, we need 3 middles, we need the 2 comprehensive high schools. I would love a new building for an alternative high school, and I would love to expand the early childhood center. Just as an aside, we can throw that in there, would be really beneficial. But we know we need the schools that currently exist in Cherry Hill. So it becomes more of a directional piece of, this is what we believe as a school district, this is what we believe the direction we should travel. And remember, there are 2 things that determine how schools are organized. There's no right way to organize schools. It's space and money. right? That's what makes that determination. And again, it's based on a philosophy that the school district is going to adopt. So it can certainly go to B&F when we look at some of those pieces. I always, the hesitation to go too deep down one direction to do the research, especially, in a February, March, and April time with Lynn or with the business office, is we're also in the throes of finalizing a, $215 million budget, and what does that look like in terms of where they go. So I think there's a philosophical part as we go through right now for, to again, narrow down that direction a little bit.
Now, can I ask, I'll ask a clarifying question for Dr.
Sure.
If on Tuesday we came up with a recommendation for 3 neighborhood schools to redraw.
Yes.
For children next year, like the ROSA process has begun.
ROSA process begun.
They're
I would not,
registering for kindergarten.
I would not recommend educationally making any change prior to 2022.
Yeah.
You need at least a year's time frame. And again, if we were talking about 2022, that decision would need to be made within the next 6 weeks, I would say, honestly, because there's a lot that goes into that. I would tell you, they're always looking at least a year out, if not 18 months. 18 months is ideal. Think about, when we did the project with full day kindergarten, the Board of Education made the commitment in October of 2017, and we implemented in September of 2019, that it took that time to go through. Dr. Mahan and the committee, the work that they did in preparing, hiring staff, developing curricula, rolling out curricula, so at least a year, but probably a year, 18 months is really the time frame to make any sort of substantive change like that. And then depending upon what change is going to be in place, then you also need to take a look at who's currently in that school, right? What's that time frame look like for the children who are there? Who's going to be impacted? That all would need to be considered, which again takes into that time frame consideration. But that also matches up, and I do like the way that you go about talking, that it's the parallel discussions, because at the same time, if we're talking about bricks and mortar physical things that end up in a referendum, you're talking about a year and a half before something like that's going to take place. So there, it allows us to give some, if there's work that's got to be done, what are we doing with the kids? Where does that go? And that's where it really needs to be clear so that it meshes together. Community has to be aware, parents have to be able to plan. And again, some parents, during the course of the discussion with the virtual town hall, relatively articulate about, what their concerns are, should we make a change? That all has to be taken into consideration, and folks have to be aware.
So, okay, so thank you. So I think for the people in the public, continue applying if you would like, on the middle school level, continuing registering for kindergarten, on the elementary. But yeah, given the timeline, we're gonna have to come up with a point of view in strategic planning and bring it to the floor. I think the other thing, and maybe this will give people comfort on the board, I don't know, but I think we're gonna try to start using the 2 discussion sessions for strategic planning at the board, because I have felt for the last couple of meetings that people feel like we're running away from it. I don't want people to feel that way, because we do need the full. There's no decision we can possibly make in committee that has any weight at all. So we'll try to be even more strategic about these 2 sessions where we typically don't have stuff to move. We will someday, but for now it's good to just get some of this feedback. So thank you very much. And if there's nothing else, I think. Appreciate it.
Okay, was that it? Okay. So that'll bring us to new business. Did anyone have any items for new business? And I can't see in the room, so I apologize.
Nobody in the room has their hand up, Mrs. Neary?
Okay, thank you. Okay, if nothing under new business, I'll move to old business. Did anyone have items under old business?
Mrs. Schultz has her hand up, Mrs. Neary?
Thank you. I saw it that time. Thank you. Mrs. Schultz?
Yep, thank you. I just wanted to circle back to the discussion, just as a follow-up in regards to the information that pertains to if the district, or pardon me, I guess if we go into red, very high risk category. I know this was something that administration had asked for feedback from the board. So I just kind of wanted to open this up to conversation so that we could just kind of have the discussion amongst the board in regards to what the board's feedback was. And specifically is the question on the table is, I guess, does the board believe that we should follow the recommendation to close schools if the county is in the red, very high risk category. So that's just kind of my question, just because again, there was the question and the ask was what was the, just to kind of give feedback from the board and provide that to the administration.
I guess I have a quick follow-up question to that. Is that still the guidance from the state, or has that guidance changed?
So in the most recent update that came out from the state last week, that it's not as direct. Let me find the actual language. This is nearing. So the addition that they put in to the matrix, right, that goes through green, yellow, orange, and red recommendations for schools under risk level red, which is the very high risk category, still in the column, it says recommend fully remote learning. There's a caveat that's now in the table that they added in the most recent revision that says schools that offer in-person learning despite very high risk of community transmission, red regional risk level, should follow recommendations for high risk of community transmission, orange regional risk level. So it's not as direct as it has been in terms of the recommendation from the Department of Health. Previously, the Department of Health was in red, very, very high risk category, was remote instruction. Now there's a caveat that's provided by the Department of Ed.
Okay, that's clear as mud. I think everybody will be just as stumped as I was. That's very not clear, but okay, so that's the guidance from the state that they're giving us. I guess I'll open it up to other members of the board.
Ben?
So in addition to not being an education expert, I'm not a population health expert. The students from the high school are telling us not too many are going, but we're orange. Is there a possibility, like, would administration recommend looking at something here where high school, maybe at least gen ed could go remote, because most of them are choosing that, by far, but is it something where we could look at different populations? Like, is there a methodology like that? Because if not, I think we really need to lean into government. I mean, if it's like, hey, this is what we recommend, but if you're going to go ahead anyway, do the next level, that still sounds to me like, we've got a new, more virulent strain out there. I don't know. However, if we could separate the populations and look at them separately, especially just given the anecdotal from the high school, I'd be interested in at least looking at that. That would be something I would, as a board member, like to see at least consider.
Ben, I just want to make sure I'm understanding. Or would that be like if we did move into red very, because I think I'm following, I just want to make sure I'm clear, but are you saying like if we were to move in red and very high risk, that you would, because when you said tier, are you saying that you were, and I'm going to put words in your mouth, but like if we were red and high risk, like high school, keep in person, like middle school, go back to fully remote, like I just I'm not clear on what you mean by tiered in regards to if we were in the red, very high risk zone, and I certainly don't want to put words in your mouth, but it wasn't clear to me.
No, it's perhaps purposely so.
Yeah, that's why I was like, thinking my point, let me
I
start.
have a little expertise offered.
Yeah.
What I was saying is, if we have to make one decision for everyone in red, I would say go forward. If we can look at every population and say, look, gen ed, high school, you're not going in because so few of you are. Clearly, we can deliver this, but elementary school, maybe we look at it differently. Special needs like one-on-one, maybe we look at that differently. But I guess as a Board of Ed member and as a sort of a layman, I mean, I need to go onto somebody's recommendation, not my person. I don't have anything to offer.
Yeah, okay, I was.
Lori,
Ms. Stern, go ahead.
You can see me.
I can, just a very corner, small.
So I think like probably everybody on these rooms and, tuned in, I think a lot of people thought a lot about this, and I certainly have from a whole lot of different perspectives. First and foremost, I think it's very critical that we look at what the strong guidance is in terms of our district. What are our values and our goals, and our, mental health is one of our values and goals. Also our health, overall health and safety of our students, their education. I mean, there are so many pieces. I look at this as this has gone on for so long. And there's, a lot of the guidance in the beginning was this strictly looking at the physical health issues, which were to protect people from, prioritizing protecting transmission of the virus first and foremost, which still has to be at the forefront. There's another emerging, we call it, in my line of work in mental health, we call it, it's the second pandemic, and that is a mental health pandemic. And there's a lot of research coming out. There are very disturbing and distressing information about the significant increase of mental health issues, even suicides that are going on, both with kids and adults. And it's really related to where it's not researched, validated at this point, but the connections that are drawn is it's very likely related to a lot of factors, most of which are just the social isolation and the lack of normalcy in people's routines and lives. And when we look at students, school and all the activities that relate to school are the normalcy of childhood. So for me, I think first and foremost, every student in New Jersey and in our district has the right, and their families, to decide that they want to be full remote. And that has to be, to me, that's non-negotiable. And it's non-negotiable. It's directly from the governor and the Department of Ed. So any child or family who does not feel safe for any reason has the right to stay home and do full virtual learning. And there are a lot of kids thriving in that situation, and that's fantastic. And we have a whole other set of kids who are not thriving, as a matter of fact, struggling tremendously. And then also we think about their families, struggling with childcare, struggling with, work situations, challenges. So we have to think about those kids. And then of course we have the populations we all talk about, our most vulnerable populations, our kids with special needs, our English language learners, and our youngest learners who do not understand and have a routine of school down, who are, early reading, all those skills. Those are our most vulnerable populations when it comes, from what I understand, from what I've observed. So, and I look at things like, I understand Children's Hospital has a, I don't know what it's called, the lab. It's a lab where they make, policy lab, where they make recommendations. I mean, I'd love to continue to see where their recommendations, I've heard that they recently changed to suggesting, but I have not looked into this further, so I'm not sure if that's, I don't want to speak to that, but, I think we have to take in all those pieces. I want to see, I think it's critical that we continue to keep our schools hybrid, and I'd like to see us move towards, that's the first piece, and that's even if we go into red. Because again, we've seen the data, with the exception of maybe one elementary school that has a pretty high hybrid percentage, all of our schools are I think around average, were they around 50%? 50% students are choosing hybrid, which means we have maximum kind of registered students who are supposed to be going in on any given day, except for I think one elementary school, is 25% of our student population. And from anecdotal information, I don't know that that's happening. Certainly at the higher levels, I don't think that's happening. And that's what I'm hearing from people. I know it's my own kids' experience. They have a maximum, one of my kids was in school, and one day in all of his classes, there was one class with one other student. And the other classes, he was the only student. Now, I'm not saying that that's ideal either for social emotional learning, but I think our numbers are somewhat manageable in terms of safety. And so I think we have to move to the second piece then, which is, you know, the need for kids to be in person. And there are a lot of kids that fall in that category. And I think we have some high priority kids for that category. So I think, again, I think we want to look at what is the, you know, the Children's Hospital Policy Lab, you know, because they're experts in the area. And I think we also want to look at, like, there's districts that were full remote that because of mental health issues, they decided to switch over to hybrid. So I really, that's just a very, you know, that's definitely where I see things. I think there's a reason the Department of Health changed the guidelines to allow for schools to stay open, even in red. And I think we have to think about, why would they make that change at this point when there are variants, you know, but they made the change for a reason. It's not easy. There's not one right way. That's just the way I look at it. And I think I'm thrilled that the We Return to Learn and We Return to Work committees are reconvening starting next week. I think we want to, because we have to think also, what's our next step? You know, if we hopefully stay in orange, which it sounds like the numbers are going down anyway, and maybe we stay here, we also have to think about what comes next. How do we continue to enhance the learning our students are doing? We heard from our student rep that they'd like to have lunch, which I don't know if that's a good idea or not, but so that's it. Thank you.
Okay, no problem. I guess my only thought is, I don't know that it's necessarily, maybe it's piggybacking yours a bit, Miriam, that it's a zero-sum game at this point, because it looks like at the state level and the federal level, they're pushing to ensure that we can have students in school in some way. And I do agree, keeping that remote option, you know, has to be out there. And I don't think that guidance has changed any that I've heard. So perhaps it is a matter of, you know, even when it's red, if they're not mandating a closure, you know, that we're able to maybe pivot quickly or rethink about how we're bringing the kids in or who's coming in. Those are just my initial thoughts. Ms. Rorio?
I think as we should most, like, if we keep having this conversation and if it were to happen, just to continue to keep I guess, informed of what the administrators and the school staff at all levels have and feel about what's happening, again, with the parents and our students. And that way, being able to follow up and address any of the concerns, if whether they decide to send their students back into school or keep them home. But it's just whatever it is, keeping that engagement piece open, right? That line of communication, because I think that's the biggest concern, is that, you know, there's all these things happening, all these questions. We're all worried if this, you know, how long this pandemic is going to last. The numbers are showing to be reduced. Like, if the county tracks that, we see that, but what does that look like for us? And I think the best we could do is just listen to our, like, internal supports, our school staff, and our students and teachers and parents. Like, just, you know, if there's a concern that they have, address immediately. That's the best way we could do this. That's the best way we're going to be able to move forward, continue with hybrid, you know, and let parents decide whether or not they want to send their children back to school or not. I mean, I think that's at least the best I could come up with right now. And you know, I'm not a public health expert, so I just know that we just need to listen.
I agree. Is there any, oh, I see somebody's hand up on the screen. Ms. Stratton, sorry. We can go back and forth between panelists and attendees. I didn't see
No worries. We'll have this mastered by 2025. No worries. I just kind of had a question, you know, as a new board member, was that the I guess the factor that you all thought about going into all of this? Did you really just go by the guidance from what color we were in? in terms of moving forward. Because if from my initial thought is if that's what the precedent has been in terms of our guiding, the policy in whatever way, then I don't like us switching gears and now saying, well, now we'll look at something totally different. I understand that we should always be reevaluating, right? But like, if that's how you guys were measuring what the best course of action was before, I would hate for that to change. So I don't know if that was the kind of precedent it was prior to us coming on. And then my only second piece was, to Mrs. Stern's point, to Mrs. Arroyo's point, there's always the option for parents to choose, to stay full remote regardless of what's happening. And clearly we're seeing that in our schools, parents are making those decisions. But I just want us to also think about like the administrators I guess the schools do we have to look at them as all one shot across the board? Like to Mrs. Stern's point, to Mr. Ovadio's point, like, does the decision have to be made for everybody, or is there a possibility at some point for us to say, okay, well, we know that the numbers and I'm just throwing something out there, we know the numbers at East are really low. Let's now survey the teachers and the students and see if maybe we should just shut it down for there, or does it not matter? Like if it's not wasting us any money or costing us any money extra to have two options, what would be the need to change it, I guess. That's just my initial thoughts. Again, I'm kind of learning what you guys, decision-making process moving to this point. So I would love to just make sure that we're all not jumping off of what you guys had already done so much work on.
Ms. Fardell, I saw your hand as well.
I think that, obviously, the administration gets a lot more information than we do, with the county health department and so forth. But a couple of my thoughts are, if we go into the red zone and there is a decision to allow the in-person learning to continue, is it possible to re-look at how those classrooms are configured? So the higher the color, the more risk we have. So would it make sense at that point to try to reduce the number of people that are in the building? So what I mean by that is, if we have all of the teachers in the building, but we only have X amount of students, do we really need to have all of the teachers in the building? Can we lower the risk by having teachers who are teaching remotely and some teachers who are in the buildings? Again, limiting the overall number of people in the building at a given time. And I don't know that would work, but I just think it's something to consider, because that is one of the factors with spread is numbers.
Oh, you froze there, Ms. Fardell.
I'm done.
Okay. Was there anyone else? And I apologize. Apparently it's my connection. So if it goes out, I apologize.
Mrs. Matlack has her hand up.
Okay, Mrs. Matlack, thank you.
Thank you. Thanks. There are some, everybody's made great points, especially about the social emotional well-being of our students and the benefit of being back in the classrooms. But if we're in the red, we also have to consider that the adults in our schools, our teachers and the staff, are the ones that are most at risk. So, that puts us, we need to consider that. And that, because we need to consider health and safety of everybody, our students and our staff. So, might not be popular, but I think if we go into the red, I think we should consider following the guidelines, the initial guidelines. Just all remote.
Thank you, Mrs. Matlack. So that does bring a good point, and that might piggyback into Ms. Friedel's if we're, if we chose to deviate from that, keeping the safety of our students and staff in mind means we would probably have to come up with an alternate plan to make that feasible if we decided to keep the schools open and continue even if we hit the red, and what that means. So that, the teachers that are at risk are not at concern of being in the building and so on. So it is something to think about, because I don't know what we have in place for that now, once we're in the red.
Mrs. Neri, I don't know if you can see, but just some comments on, hopefully we don't go into the red, but I guess my only comments, since I raised this as old business, I think everybody's raised really, really great points, and I wanted to make sure that we were providing feedback to the administration. But I do think that because the guidelines were just revised, so I think as recently as like this week, I do think this is a topic that's on everybody's mind of like, if we go into the red, what are we gonna do? What aren't we gonna do? So I think it would be in our best interest to maybe communicate, like, and this is, I think we've said for the last 12 months, this is an extremely fluid situation, and it's ever changing. But I do think it would be helpful, because those guidelines have been out there and they've been revised, that if we go in the red, that it has been advised to, or I guess the recommendation is that schools don't necessarily have to close. So I would love to be able to take an approach of almost like what Mrs. Friedel is saying, is maybe I would tend to lean and be in favor of, if we're in the red, of keeping remote and hybrid, because we have the numbers of how many kids are in schools. So are we able to safely social distance? Are we able to reconfigure classrooms? Are we able to not necessarily have as many staff in the building? Because I think Carol also brings up a great point of we have to think of our staff that is in the building. That also has to be top priority. But I do think, like, hopefully we're not in the red, but I do think kind of maybe being ahead of it and saying this is what we're prepared to do if we go into the red, and getting that out there would just be, would help appease the minds of parents who this is top of mind for right now, of like, what are we gonna do if we get in the red? So I think those are kind of just my comments. And I do also think that this is just, I think it's just a good conversation that we're having, just because I think it provides good feedback and perspective from all of us as a board. So I think that's kind of my comments. And there's a lot, there's just so many different layers involved here, but that's all. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Was there anybody else who wanted to comment on that? I don't see any other hands. Okay, then I'll move to second public comment. This public comment is for any topic. And as with the first public comment, it's 3 minutes. And please state your full name and your address. And I will go to the first hand that I see, which is Mindy. Please state your name and address.
Hi, Mindy Rosen, 6 Fairhaven Court. I just want to tell all the new members that we have not been in the red since 4/25/2020. We were in the red from 3/28 to 4/25 of 2020. Then we were in the yellow. So the last things were 10/3 to 11/7. We were in the yellow. We've been in the orange since 11/14. We still closed because we thought we were going to be in the red, but we never were in the red since April of 2020. So I just really think you need to think about that. We closed without being in the red, and we haven't been in the red since then. So we continue being in the orange from 11/14 until present. Okay, that's it. Thanks so much.
Okay, thank you. Okay, next I see Stanley Krantz.
My name is Stanley Krantz, 401 Old Orchard Road. In all my years as a resident and employee, this is my third opportunity to speak at a Board of Education meeting, and all three are within the past few years. The first was after I received a brief phone call from an exemplary young science teacher who said that he had just left a meeting where an administrator began by asking, "Why is science so important in Cherry Hill schools?" He said he could not believe the question, nor what followed, and knew right then that he was leaving the district. I shared this concern with the Board of Education and the administration at the time. My second opportunity warned the Board of Education that there would be harmful consequences to student learning and their future educational and employment pursuits resulting from a loss of science instructional time. It now has amounted to nearly 20% loss since 2012. This and increase the teaching load to 5 classes will render laboratory investigations nothing more than a mirage. I speak today after learning that since 2010, our school district continues to receive a lower standing among all New Jersey districts as assessed by 2 credible sources, School Digger and the U.S. News and World Report. I am saddened but not surprised. Our school district appears to be in decline, while neighboring school districts have ratings that are even better or remain unchanged over the same time period. The victims are our children. Reversing this downward trend is the responsibility that falls on the shoulders of the Board of Education. And that should be your first and primary goal. I am reminded of the words of the late, great Russell Akoff, Professor Emeritus of Management Science at the Wharton School, University of Pennsylvania, who taught that there is a difference between doing things right and doing the right thing. Doing the right thing is wisdom and effectiveness. Doing things right is efficiency. His words, that the righter you do the wrong thing, the wronger you become. If you do the wrong thing and make a mistake to correct it, you become wronger. It's better to do the right thing wrong than doing the wrong thing right. I would recommend you read Dr. Akoff's words and apply them to where we are in Cherry Hill. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Krantz. Okay, next we have Carolina Bevid. Okay, did we lose?
I'm here.
Okay, there we
Hi,
go.
Carolina Bevid, 1213 Cropwell Road. First, I'd like to thank the board for discussing returning students to school in any capacity. This is maybe the first time I've heard it come up at all since I started listening to board meetings, which is kind of recently. So obviously I'd like kids back in school 5 days a week. Although the CDC recommends 6 feet of distance, this is just a guideline, and WHO, which is also a health agency, recommends 3 feet of distance. That may allow us to get more students in the building sooner. To Dr. Mahan and Mrs. Friedel, I believe you both sit on the We Return to Learn committee. I would like you to please designate Mondays as regular instructional days. Right now, definitely for my children, at least one of my children, they are wasted. Not a lot goes on Monday, and my child needs a lot of help learning how to read. And as bond discussions continue, I'd like to see a presentation about the district's budget before the pandemic, comparing it to the budget during the pandemic. And that's all. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Bevitt. Okay, next I see Jessica Fingerman.
Hi there, can you hear me?
Yes.
Oh, hi. Jessica Fingerman, 1764 Morris Drive. Thank you so much for taking my call. So to piggyback off of what Mrs. Bevitt said just a moment ago, so she had said that the recommendations by the CDC has been lowered from the 6-foot recommendation to the 3-foot recommendation. And what I wanted to know, and I guess Dr. Malash would be the best person to ask about it, would full in-person be possible with that square footage, or would it still not be enough square footage? And that would be, you know, going from the 6-foot recommendation to the 3-foot recommendation. And then my second question was, first, I think that the COVID dashboard that you guys set up on the website is a fantastic idea. I think having transparency and letting the parents and the other community members know what's going on in terms of spread in the schools or spread among staff and students is extremely important. I think that there's a lot of opportunity for people to get anxious and, you know, someone is absent. Do you think it's this? Do you think it's that? And then I think just having those numbers there really allays some of those concerns. But my question is about that COVID dashboard. I noticed that it had been up and then it was down and then it was up again and the numbers were different. And I wanted to know if Dr. Malash or whoever, you know, is setting up that board could explain what the discrepancy is between the two numbers. And the last thing I just wanted to say, thank you to the board, thank you to the administrators and the staff, excuse me, of Cherry Hill Public Schools. I know that this has been a heck of a year, and I just want to say I really appreciate everything you guys are doing. Thank you for taking my questions, and look forward to talking to you again soon.
Great, thank you, Ms. Fingerman. Next, we have Jamie Goodwin.
Hi, Jamie Goodwin, 112 Mansfield Boulevard South. So I want to start with saying in this time of much uncertainty and many difficult tasks in front of our students, teachers, staff, and administrators, it is easy to lose sight of questions of equity and make them explicit. So I want to start off by listing off a few suggestions I've mentioned several times before, but I continue to think are important. And the first one that I've mentioned is around creating more specific guidelines that would contain and include specifically questions of equity when practicing remote and hybrid learning. Some suggestions of how that would look is including increased flexibility with deadlines, removal of participation grades, optional pass-fail grading, especially in our high schools when there are students who are now feeling as if they may not be able to graduate with the difficulty that COVID has brought. Also sort of making more explicit about the audio and video practices. I know that there has been many conversations that have happened, but it still seems that students are reporting being marked absent, losing points, and various forms of public humiliation for not being able to turn on their camera or use their microphone. And so I do recommend that the superintendent send out a letter to all families and then have that letter sent out by building principals that just explicitly mentions that students should not receive any academic or social penalties for keeping their cameras and or microphones off. And then if possible, like just even a more complete equity guideline informed by an outside consultant to really just make sure that we're keeping our students who are historically left on the margins in the forefront of our teaching practice. And I wanted to end with sharing an excerpt from a blog I started early fall, and it says this. It says, so then what does institutional empathy actually look like? These are the kinds of practices and policies that at their core embody and reflect a kind of radical empathy. They are policies that are written to prioritize the success and protection of the most marginalized within that institution. This seems particularly relevant to a district like Cherry Hill, situated in a once white suburb that has increasingly become browner, less rich, and more special, yet still given the charge to educate all its residents. I truly believe that this means Cherry Hill will only be able to succeed in its job if empathy is institutionalized in the very foundation of its schooling praxis. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Goodwin. And next I see Melissa. If you could state your full name and address.
Melissa Bush, 420 Lavender Hill Drive. First, I want to thank the district for returning the students to hybrid instruction. The last 2 weeks of remote learning were incredibly rough. My son cried, whined, and became increasingly distant and disengaged. Just pulling out his backpack out of the closet last week brought a smile to his face. Returning to school has made a huge difference already. He now comes and sits with us, engages in his favorite activities, and started giving us hugs and kisses again. That may seem small, but not to our family. I heard similar positive experiences from elementary school parents. I'm glad to hear that you are reconvening the We Return to Learn and We Return to Work committees next week. I find the development promising, though I find it concerning that this wasn't part of planning from the beginning. It seems that the transition from hybrid to full in-person instruction should have been on your mind from the beginning. Nevertheless, I hope you will be open and transparent about the challenges you face, the metrics you will use to make your decision, and your expected timeline in getting the children back 5 days per week. If you don't have the students who want to be there back in the classroom prior to June 18th, you will have families continue to leave the district for private schools. This will have devastating effects on our children's academic proficiency and their social emotional growth, taxpayers' property values, and the security of district staff employment. Also, you will likely have an uphill battle getting a bond passed in the near future. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Bush. Okay, I don't see any other hands, so I'll turn it to Mrs. Sugars for the written comments.
I'm going to start with Zoe and Jeffrey Zangrilli, 416 South Cranford Road. We have a struggling first grader who needs in-person learning to succeed. While we appreciate the return of the hybrid model last week, we asked the district to allow children to attend in person every day for the 9 a.m. to 1 p.m. session. Particularly, this should be focused on younger elementary students and students with special needs, IEPs, and 504 plans. Our child's class, for example, currently has 5 or 6 children who attend in person each day. We have heard of other classes where only 2 or 3 children are attending. We would like to know what number of children the average elementary school classroom is permitted to hold. According to the calculations that were made by the district last year, we assumed it would likely be more than the numbers currently attending each day. It would make such a difference to these children to be able to attend every day. Thank you for your consideration. Gina Raval, 15 Equestrian Lane in Cherry Hill. My kids are in 4th and 1st grades. Although they are very well adjusted, they could benefit from more schooling. I understand Voorhees will be starting 3 days of in-person school every other week. They have also longer school days of 9 to 2. Is this something we can consider in Cherry Hill? If hybrid's going to be the option for the remainder of the year, it would be fabulous to see these kids getting more instruction. Jeffrey Potowitz, 110 Kilburn Drive. I referred in the past to an article entitled "The Perfect Suburban is Living a Financial Nightmare. Here is who is to blame." Great public relations for Chesterfield School District and the need for S2 from the article. Their answer to the question is that they are being cheated by the state. Their kids and community is being ripped off by the state. In Cherry Hill, we are having a financial nightmare also. Our community and kids are being ripped off just like Chesterfield's was, except for us, it's been 3 generations of kids since the cuts in the 1990s. Numbers I am providing are approximate. Some are from articles on New Jersey Education Aid. Now Chesterfield School District efficient is listed at $16.92 per pupil, and ours is listed at $12.45 per pupil. Now they receive $3,662 per pupil, and we receive $1,807 per pupil. 2008-2009, Chesterfield received $374,661 in direct state aid to education, or $863 per pupil. Cherry Hill received $17,153,705 in 2008-09 in direct state aid to education, or $1,534 per pupil. Their increase with the help of S2 is over 400% for pupils since 2008-2009. Our increase in direct state aid to education since 2008, 2009 has been 18% per pupil. That is basically no per pupil increase at all. Our direct state aid formula to education was 17.3 million for 2018-19, 2019-20, 18.4 million, 2021, 19.5 million. During the school year 1920, we added full day kindergarten. The state calculated our kindergarten population is 267.5, ignoring the fact that the multiplier should be 1, not half. The full number of students in kindergarten was 535. Given our per pupil direct state aid to education, we were shortchanged by $483,372. Can you imagine what we could have done with those funds for? But what? It turns out the actual number of full day kindergarten students for the year 2019-20 was 727, not 535. Going to full day substantially increased the number of students going to our public kindergarten, which means we were really shorter by $830,000 plus. The 1 year supposed increase of 1.1 million in direct state aid was not actual increase at all. Instead of the state praising us and trying to minimally support us for going to full day kindergarten, the state did the opposite. How easily the state is able to ignore our public's pleas for help at meetings. Cherry Hill leaders, please, please help our community. Lauren Greenberg, 508 Bryan Drive. I'd like to start by thanking Dr. Malash and the rest of the administration for bringing students back into the buildings last week for hybrid learning. My 3 elementary age children are so happy on the days they get to go into school. Their whole demeanor is different. In light of that, I'd like to come back to a comment Dr. Malash made in response to my question at the town hall on January 11th. Specifically, it was the comment about not being overly optimistic around our ability to return to full 5 days of live instruction prior to the end of the 2020-21 academic year in mid-June due to state guidelines that prevent the district from having enough classroom space for the number of children they must accommodate in a full return. At his COVID-19 press briefing yesterday, Governor Murphy stated that the number of school districts throughout the state that now have full in-person instruction is on the rise. In fact, our neighboring district, Voorhees, just announced that beginning on February 1, they will bring the elementary school students into school for 3 days a week from 9 a.m. to 2 p.m. with lunch, and special needs students 5 days a week. How are these districts making it work with the state mandate of being 6 feet apart? It's quite possible that teachers and our older citizens are most at risk members for severe outcomes from COVID and will likely be vaccinated within the next few months. With this in mind, Dr. Malash, are you and the rest of the administration willing to either come up with creative solutions or leverage your leadership positions to both publicly and privately advocate for relaxing any state guidelines in order to get our children back to full 5 days of live instruction as soon as possible? 2021-22 district enrollment could be impacted unless families are confident in a return to full 5 days of live instruction per week for the end of this academic year. Kelly Gasly, 501 Gatewood Road. I request that my comment be read slowly and clearly enough to be heard by all. September will be here before we know it. It is hard to predict what effect the vaccine rollout will have on our community and how much of a return to normalcy the vaccine by itself will allow for. What is the district doing to plan for returning students, especially our youngest students and our students with special education needs, to school full-time by September? Is the district going to consider creative options? For instance, one might be creating a remote-only cohort with remote-only teachers to decrease the reliance on computers for students who go into the building and relieve teachers of the added layers of teaching live and remote at the same time. As another example, teachers, parents, and other students should be surveyed imminently about what has and hasn't worked about the current school year. The results of those surveys should be made public, and the district should address what items it will be acting on addressing in next year's plan. Cannot plan for the vaccine being fully under control for our children being vaccinated, for our children being vaccinated by September. That much is clear, but we can plan for what our children's school day will look like in advance planning and contingency planning. What is the district considering to make the 21-22 school year look different and be more effective for teachers and for students, no matter what the virus has in store? Andrea Paula, 19 Dunbarton Road. Please continue to move towards full in-person learning, at least for our early elementary. In the meantime, please consider letting children with IEP and 504B 4 full days, as is the case for neighboring school districts. I welcome any board member to visit my home and spend the morning with us to witness how, despite the best intentions of passionate teachers, online learning is not educating my child. Please allow students who want to learn in person to be fully in person. Follow the science and guidelines from health experts. Children should be fully in school. I beg you to join the majority of American school districts that are now in person. Current model is failing our children. Our final comment is from Rick Short, 1002 Cheltenham Parkway. We're now in our second week of in-person learning, and still our 19 school nurses don't have COVID tests in their nurses' offices. On November 30th, 2020, Governor Murphy said Abbott tests were being sent to all school nurses, but that never occurred. I have a very serious question of human logic for Cherry Hill schools tonight. How does getting free COVID testing kits for our nurses around April from the Biden administration make any logical sense? We need testing kits tomorrow in our 19 nurse offices. Why aren't we doing everything to keep our children, teachers, and staff tomorrow? Does anyone have any logic in keeping our Cherry Hill families safe? Also, at the last Cherry Hill School Board meeting, Dr. Malash confirmed on video he's not following CDC school recommendations of pumping extra air 2 hours before schools open and 2 hours after schools close. Why isn't this occurring if it's going to keep everyone safer? Again, why aren't we doing everything to keep our children, teachers, and staff safe tomorrow? Please stop ignoring the obvious ways to keep everyone safe when COVID spreads tomorrow. That is the end of our comments.
Okay, thank you. Dr. Malash, did you have any final comments?
I do. Just a couple to address some of these that came through. In terms of the tests, what Governor Murphy said, I don't have a response to that. You have to inquire with Governor Murphy. And I will reiterate that we are circulating the air in our classrooms well beyond 2 hours before the school day and well after 2 hours after the school day. That's something that runs. It's a continuous circulation that takes place. Pumping additional air into a classroom, right? There's some physics and some things we can certainly discuss about what that looks like. It's not a balloon, right? The air has to go someplace when it comes in. There is a recirculation that takes place. We do that continuously, whether there's children and staff in the buildings or not. There's a lot that, about what does the transition look like. Our we return, it's mentioned a couple times tonight, our we return to learn committees will reconvene next week. These are planned meetings. They've been planned for since back in November, December. These meetings are scheduled purposefully to coincide after the hybrid was relaunched to give some information and some feedback from staff, from students, and from families about what's going on, have those discussions about what's taking place. And again, as I said, our discussion has been about transitioning all of our children back to school beginning last March 16th about where we are. I did say that I was not overly optimistic at our meeting at the virtual town hall on January 11th. I hope that I'm proven wrong with where that is. There was a question about could we bring everybody back if we did not follow the state guidelines of 6 feet. And please know that it's from the Department of Education and from the state. It's about the 6 feet separation. That's not a Cherry Hillism. That's not something that we have chosen on our own. I'm aware of what the World Health Organization has said with 3 feet. Still, the Department of Ed in the state says we have to observe the 6 feet. I encourage, again, we've talked about this, families, people reaching out to the department, to the governor. I encourage you to do that. Let your voices be heard, right? Those are the decision makers on that end. Let your voices be heard at that spot. If it was 3 feet, a minimum of 3 feet separation, will we be able to bring everybody back? Not everybody. We'd be able to bring certainly a lot more students back into classrooms, but not necessarily everybody. My understanding of Voorhees transition with 3 days for students every other week is that they are transitioning to having a full remote day, which we currently have on Monday. I'm not sure when theirs is, so that students are assigned 1 week, they're going to come in, and the other week they're going to be home on that third day. I don't believe that it's 3 days every week that children are going to be in school. Certainly we can ask the We Return to Learn committee to discuss that piece. I appreciate, Jane, what you said, especially about empathy and the words that you shared from your blog and the importance of empathy. We'll continue to work with staff and to get that message out about expectations. think that is it. Yes.
Okay, great. Thank you. Okay, so that brings us to the end. At this time, I'm going to make a motion to convene for a second executive session. At this time, no decisions will be made. Do I have a second?
Mrs. Neary, the motion should specify it's for personnel and legal matters.
Okay, thank you. So the motion is for personnel and legal matters. Do I have a second? Ms. Stratton? Okay, thank you. Motion carries.
And for the board members, if you go into your email, there's a new invitation for Microsoft Teams for the executive session.
Okay, thank you.
I'm gonna count, but I was gonna have to find a new.
Yeah, no,
And then I realized I don't need the
Yeah.
right. All the transitions.
Yeah, do you guys want to go to the bathroom?
Yeah, I can move.